Harold Jacobs grew up in a cold, unwelcoming household. His mother Brenda was distant, while his stepfather Trevor provided the only warmth in his life. Trevor, a kind-hearted trucker, treated Harold as his own son, despite not being his biological father. Brenda, however, resented Harold, seeing him as a reminder of her past failures. This environment shaped Harold into a man determined to create a family that would never feel the coldness he experienced as a child. Despite his mother's emotional distance, Harold found comfort in Trevor's guidance, who taught him the values of hard work, respect, and love, principles that Harold held dear as he grew up. In high school, Harold met Sandra, whom he believed would help him build the loving family he always wanted. They married young after Sandra became pregnant with their daughter Rebecca. Harold joined the army, then transitioned to a security career, all to provide the best life for his family. But the foundation of love and trust he worked so hard to build wasn't as strong as he had hoped. Harold never saw himself as extraordinary. His job as a security officer often involved enforcing rules, dealing with unruly individuals, and handling the associated paperwork. Despite the challenges, Harold found satisfaction in his work and took pride in supporting his family. His wife, Sandra, a beautiful woman with youthful looks, worked at a local bank, eventually becoming a bank manager after attending community college. Together they provided a stable life for their daughter, Rebecca. Harold and Sandra were both 18 when Rebecca was born. With help from their families, they managed to care for Rebecca, eventually moving into their own home. Harold joined the army after high school, serving 4 years before landing a security job with an armored truck service. Over time, he worked his way up to become the regional director for a large, world-renowned security company in the Northeast. Meanwhile, Sandra's career at the bank brought additional financial stability to the family. Rebecca, now 17, was once the center of Harold's world, but their relationship grew strained as she got older. Since turning 12, Rebecca had become increasingly rude to Harold, a change that deeply hurt him. He chalked it up to typical teenage rebellion, but it felt different. One incident that stood out was when Rebecca was 12 and Harold asked her to go to bed. She responded with a defiant. Another time at 14, she publicly embarrassed him by yelling. Her sweet 16 was particularly memorable for Harold. He worked tirelessly, pulling triple shifts and working back-to-back 17-day stretches to save up for a down payment on a used 2014 Chevy Impala for her birthday. Despite all his effort, Rebecca's reaction was dismissive. Harold was hurt by her ingratitude, and though he managed to hold back his anger, the memory lingered. Later, Rebecca allowed a boyfriend to drive the car, which ended in a crash that totaled it. Though Harold was relieved she was unharmed, seeing the wrecked car brought him to tears, as all his hard work seemed wasted. Harold often found himself alone in disciplining their daughter Rebecca as his wife Sandra never supported him. She would only intervene to excuse Rebecca's behavior and criticize Harold. After a long day of work, Harold was heading home, but he found some comfort in knowing he had saved up to surprise Sandra with a trip to Jamaica for their anniversary. They had planned this trip for years but never found the time. Harold loved his wife deeply and looked forward to surprising her. Driving home in his 2024 Chevrolet Camaro, Harold reminisced about how he, Sandra and his friend would debate whether Ford or Dodge was better. Despite the challenges, he loved his wife and daughter and cherished his family. As he approached his house, he reflected on the struggles he'd faced, but felt grateful for his family. When he walked in, he saw Rebecca coming down the stairs in a revealing outfit. Concerned, he asked, "Where are you going to dress like that?" Rebecca, rolling her eyes, replied, "Going to the movies and then a house party in Lafayette, I told you." Harold, ignoring her attitude, responded, "You didn't mention a house party. If you had, I would have said no. And there's no way I'm letting you go out dressed like that. You're grounded." Rebecca was outraged. "Grounded? For what? My clothes?" Harold calmly explained, "It's not just the clothes. You're grounded because you're failing math, despite my warnings. And for skipping school to hang out with friends. That's why." Rebecca's anger boiled over and she spat, "You pathetic excuse of a man. Mom and I should have left you years ago." Without thinking, Harold backhanded Rebecca, sending her onto the couch. Shocked by his own action, he stared at her with a cold intensity. He then spoke firmly, "If you live under my roof, you follow my rules. I won't tolerate disrespect in my home. Do you understand? Terrified, Rebecca nodded. Yes, sir. Good. You're grounded for 3 weeks. Now go to your room. Afterward, Harold went to the fridge for a beer, bracing himself for the argument he knew would come with Sandra. After finishing his drink, he knocked on Rebecca's door. Hearing her small voice, he entered and saw she had been crying. Despite everything, she was still his daughter and he loved her. Honey, I'm sorry I slapped you. It shouldn't have happened. But when you called me a loser, something in me snapped. I love you, but I won't be disrespected in my own home. If something is bothering you, we need to talk about it. I'll always love you. Rebecca, though still upset, didn't respond. Harold kissed her forehead and left the room. An hour later, Sandra sped into the driveway, furious. The moment she walked in, she demanded, "Who the hell do you think you are, slapping our baby like that, Harold?" Harold remained calm but firm. "Good evening, honey. Welcome home. How was work today?" "I ask because you skipped greeting me as you often do lately. To answer your question, I'm her father. And while I love our daughter, I won't tolerate disrespect in the home I provide for our family." Sandra's eyes narrowed, irritated by Harold's firm stance. She took a breath and asked, "Sandra called me at work and said you slapped her. Is that true?" Harold read her expression before replying, "Yes, I did. I slapped her hard enough that she landed on the couch. She needed to understand that her behavior is unacceptable." Sandra was shocked, covering her mouth in disbelief. "So, you're just going to slap our daughter around when she talks back?" Harold's anger grew, though he remained calm. "No, but I will discipline her when she disrespects us." "Did she tell you why I slapped her? Or did you just take her word for it?" Sandra looked down, unable to respond. Harold continued, "She was dressed inappropriately for a party she never mentioned and has been skipping school all week. Did you know that? The principal called me today, but you didn't check the missed calls or texts, did you?" Sandra admitted quietly, "No, I didn't." "At least you admitted that." "But that's not why I slapped her. I did it because she called me a stupid, pathetic excuse of a man and said you both should have left me years ago." Sandra was stunned. "She said that to you?" "Yes. Our daughter said that to my face. This isn't the first time she's disrespected me, and you've always been there to shield her from the consequences. I'm not perfect, but I work hard for this family. I wake up at 4 a.m., work 60 hours a week and handle endless complaints, contracts and clients. Yet I still make time for every school event, every game, and I help with her homework. But when I discipline her for crossing a line, I'm the bad guy." Sandra was speechless, seeing the pain and anger in Harold's eyes as he spoke. He took a deep breath and said, "I'm going for a drive. I need to clear my head." He left. Leaving Sandra stunned in the living room, Harold drove aimlessly, needing to escape. He felt like an ATM or doormat to his family, wondering how things had gone so wrong. Suddenly his phone rang. Expecting it to be Sandra or Rebecca, he saw it was his mother. He answered only to be met with her angry voice. "What in the hell is wrong with you?" "Hi Mom." "Don't hi Mom me. Sandra and Rebecca just called. They said you struck Rebecca and cursed out Sandra. Have you lost your mind?" "No Mom. Just my patience." With that, Harold hung up. Harold loved his mother to a point, but their relationship was strained. Brenda Logan had always been cold, never showing him love or compassion. His father abandoned them when Harold was born, and Brenda made it clear that she believed Harold was no good, just like his father. There was no nurturing bond between them, and she never hesitated to remind him of her low opinion of him. Harold's life changed when his mother met Trevor Jacobs when Harold was 1. Trevor was a beacon of love for both Harold and Brenda. Trevor treated Harold as his own, teaching him life lessons and even defending him when Brenda was too harsh. Although Brenda never showed Harold much love, the misuse eventually stopped and they merely tolerated each other. Trevor loved Harold so much that Harold took his last name. After Brenda and Trevor married, they had a son, Adam, who became the golden child in Brenda's eyes. Adam often used Harold to get out of trouble and took everything from him: friends, allowance, and affection. Only Trevor treated both boys equally, loving and disciplining them fairly. Harold eventually grew distant, speaking mainly to Trevor. When Harold's daughter Rebecca was born, Trevor was the only family member who supported both Harold and Sandra. Adam even tried to flirt with Sandra when Harold wasn't around. But Trevor put a stop to it until his end of life. Trevor's will surprised everyone, splitting $500,000 equally between Harold and Adam when they turned 24. Adam resented Harold for this, feeling entitled to the entire fortune because he was the biological son. Harold used his share to buy a house for his family after leaving the military. Returning to the present, Harold knew he had to go home. After watching the sunset at an old drive-in, he headed back. When he arrived, Sandra was waiting. She apologized for not considering his feelings about Rebecca, and admitted she often sided with their daughter, making Harold look like the bad guy. Harold smiled. "That's all I ask, honey. I love you and Rebecca. You are my world. Just have my back and give me the respect I give you." Sandra responded, "I love you too, Harold." They kissed and Harold pulled out 2 first-class tickets to Jamaica, revealing his surprise anniversary trip. Overjoyed, Sandra jumped into his arms, kissing him non-stop. In the days that followed, things improved in the Jacobs household. Sandra stopped undermining Harold and respected his role as the head of the family. Although Rebecca still wasn't speaking much to Harold, her attitude improved. She stopped skipping school and her grades began to recover. Even Harold's mother eased up on her nagging calls. Harold noticed his brother Adam visiting more often, which seemed to lift Rebecca's spirits. But otherwise things were going well. One day while cleaning the house before their trip, Harold and Sandra were organizing the garage and attic. Rebecca was upset about being left out of the trip, but kept her feelings to herself after their recent conflict. Harold, working in the attic, came across old photo albums, sparking nostalgia as he looked through childhood photos, wedding pictures, and memories of Rebecca growing up. Just as he was about to put the photos away, he found a plastic bag containing a bundle of letters and a large brown envelope. As he read the contents, his heart sank and his world shattered. The letter Harold found shattered him. "My dearest love, Adam. Last night was magical. I've never felt anything like it. Your touch is like an artist creating a masterpiece, nothing compared to Harold. I just want you in my arms. Yours always, Sandra." Harold was devastated, realizing Sandra loved Adam. "I've been married to her for over 20 years and she does this to me," he whispered, his world crumbling. He found more letters from Adam expressing love for Sandra and hinting at their affair, even mentioning that Rebecca had Sandra's eyes. Then Harold discovered a DNA test proving Rebecca wasn't his biological daughter. He felt betrayed and numb, wondering if his entire family knew the truth. Harold decided he needed proof. He took a hair sample from Rebecca's comb for a DNA test, determined to uncover the full truth. He gathered himself, suppressing his rage, and planned his next steps. When he left the attic, he ran into Sandra, who asked where he was going. Harold controlled his anger and calmly lied, saying he needed supplies for the attic and would pick up dinner. Once out of the house, Harold called Marcus Dwight, a trusted private investigator who worked for his company. Marcus was a former police officer who had left the force after a near-fatal ambush, dedicating his skills to private investigations instead. When Harold arrived at the office, Marcus immediately sensed something was wrong. Harold broke down, explaining everything. Marcus, who had a personal connection to a similar situation, was furious. He remembered a friend who had discovered his daughter wasn't his and lost everything in the fallout, leading to a tragic courtroom incident. Seeing Harold in such pain brought back those memories, and Marcus took the situation personally, determined to help Harold get to the bottom of it. Harold, wiping his tears, stood up. "First, I need to confirm if Rebecca is my daughter." He pulled out a bag with her hair. "Depending on the results, we'll decide what to do next. Second, I want to destroy them, not illegally, but in a way that makes them feel the pain and humiliation I'm experiencing." Marcus smiled. "Let's get to work." He showed Harold a room full of surveillance equipment. "This is all legal, as long as it's used on your property or devices in your name. I'll need your permission to install everything." Harold agreed, signing the paperwork. "I'll get the cameras in place when no one else is home. You don't need to know where they are, just trust me, they'll capture everything." I respect what you do, Harold, and I understand your pain. Feeling supported, Harold nodded. Marcus also gave him the address of a DNA testing lab nearby, suggesting he could drop off the sample that day. Determined, Harold agreed. Let's get this started. After leaving Marcus' office, Harold called his lawyer and best friend, Charles Darwin. Charles, I need to see you. Something serious has happened. Meet me at my office in an hour, Charles replied. When Harold arrived, Charles was shocked by his friend's appearance. What happened, Harold? Is Sandra and Rebecca okay? Harold broke down, recounting the day's events. Charles was furious on Harold's behalf. They won't get away with this. Legally, you can monitor anything on your property or devices in your name. We'll access any deleted files and use everything you've gathered. The law is on your side if we prove infidelity, especially with the new state laws protecting the assets of the cheated party. Seeing his friend's despair, Charles added, I can't imagine what you're going through, but you need to protect yourself now. Harold, heartbroken, said, I loved her for over 17 years, and now it all means nothing. My own daughter, who might not even be mine, despises me, and my wife cheated with my brother, who hates me just for existing. Charles, moved by Harold's pain, assured him, we'll set things right. You stood by me when I needed help, and I'll do the same for you. The two friends embraced. As Harold drove home with the supplies, he reflected on the betrayal and pain he endured that day. He was determined to keep his knowledge of the affair hidden until he had all the facts. The thought of Rebecca not being his daughter tormented him, but he braced himself for the DNA results, dreading what they might reveal. When Harold arrived home, everything seemed normal, despite his contempt. He kissed his wife to avoid raising suspicion. They finished cleaning the house and had dinner together, but Harold felt like he was living in a sitcom, surrounded by actors instead of his real family. Later that night, after everyone was asleep, Harold installed the hacking equipment on Sandra's and Rebecca's phones, following Marcus's instructions. He texted Marcus to confirm it was done, and within minutes Marcus responded, indicating the hacking had begun. By the end of the week, Harold would have the information he needed, whether he wanted it or not. The next day, after Rebecca went to school and Sandra to work, Harold decided he needed a new outlet. He couldn't just sit around feeling broken. Remembering his childhood love of comic books, he searched for a comic book shop and found one called The Mischievous Pin. Stepping inside, memories of his childhood flooded back, days spent with a friend, escaping life's troubles through comics and anime. That friend, however, had been lost to him for years, bringing a wave of sadness. At the cashier, Harold was stunned to see someone he never expected, Rose. Her eyes widened with recognition, and she greeted him with a huge smile. Harold! It's been ages. She hugged him tightly. It was the first time Harold had genuinely smiled since his ordeal began. Rose had come into Harold's life when he was a child, during a tough time. On a Parents' Day, when his mother dismissed him harshly, he had run off to cry under a tree. Rose, a girl with red hair and blue eyes, approached him, offering kindness and inviting him to join her family's picnic. That simple gesture sparked a deep friendship that grew into love by the time they were in high school. However, Harold's brother Adam, who had a history of taking things from Harold, wanted Rose for himself. When she rejected Adam's advances and defended herself against him, it led to a series of events that forced Rose and her family to move away to avoid legal trouble. Rose had apologized for the chaos, but Harold had reassured her that she had done nothing wrong, blaming himself instead. In the park where they first met, they had held each other, expressing their love, even though life had torn them apart. Seeing Rose again brought back all those memories for Harold, reminding him of a simpler, happier time. Harold and Rose had always planned to wait until they were 18 at prom, for their first time together to make it special. Over the years, their love and friendship grew stronger. But when the day of Rose's move came, it felt like a part of them died. Harold, driven by Trevor, gave Rose one last hug before watching her leave, knowing they might never see each other again. As the years passed, Harold met and married Sandra, building a family with her. Now, after all these years, he found himself reunited with Rose. Harold, I can't believe it's been so long. Rose said, tears in her eyes. Despite the years, she had grown into a beautiful woman, looking youthful at 33. With her short red hair, blue eyes, and geeky tattoos, she still carried the charm that had captivated Harold. "Rose, you look amazing," Harold replied, making her blush. They decided to catch up during Rose's break, heading to a cozy break room in the comic shop she owned. Harold was surprised and impressed. "You own this place? How did that happen?" Rose explained that after her parents died in a car accident, she discovered they had a life insurance policy and a trust from her grandparents, totaling $2 million. With her love for comics and a business background, she returned to town, bought the property, and turned it into her dream comic shop, living on the top floor. Harold was proud of her success. "You deserve this, Rose. I bet your guy is the luckiest in the world." Rose's smile faded. "He's out of the picture. I caught him cheating, and he even had the nerve to be angry when I interrupted him. Thankfully, we didn't have kids, and I got out before things got worse." Harold, relating to her pain, shared what had happened to him recently. Rose hugged him tightly. "I'm here for you, whatever happens." Harold felt a warmth he hadn't experienced in a long time. As they parted, Rose invited him to visit again. "I'd like that," Harold said before driving off. On his way home, Harold received a text from Marcus. "Meet me at Charles's." Harold knew what this meant and, despite dreading what was to come, headed there. Upon arrival, Charles's wife, Linda, greeted him warmly. "Harold, I'm so sorry about everything. We're here for you no matter what." Harold hugged Linda and thanked her before heading into the office, where Marcus and Charles awaited him with grim expressions. Marcus began, "Harold, I'm sorry, but it's bad. We found more texts and videos. They've been having an on-and-off affair since Rebecca was born. And there's more. The DNA test confirmed you're not Rebecca's father." Harold, overwhelmed with pain and humiliation, broke down. Marcus offered him a sip from his flask to steady him, then continued, "We also discovered that your mother and Rebecca knew about the affair since Rebecca was 12, around the time you noticed a change." Harold's heart broke as he read the documents. Chats between Rebecca and his mother expressing their hatred for him, their enjoyment of living off him, and plans to divorce him after Rebecca graduated. They even discussed moving Adam into the house Harold paid for, and how his mother wished he had died instead of Trevor. In shock, Harold muttered, "How could my own family hate me so much?" Charles and Linda offered comfort, with Linda reminding him, "Family isn't about blood. It's about actions. You saved Charles and me years ago, and you've been our family ever since. We love you and will always be here for you." Harold, resolved, told Charles, "We go scorched earth." Charles nodded. "How do you want the paperwork sent?" Harold decided, "I'll deliver it to Sandra myself. She's expecting a surprise, and she'll get one when she and Rebecca come home. I used to love my daughter, but now I can't even stand to hear her name." Charles agreed, asking about Adam. "I want him to get some bad news while he's at work," Harold replied. Charles smiled at the plan. "Consider it done." Harold then added, "I want something special for my mother. I'll deliver the divorce papers myself during Rebecca's party in front of everyone. I want them all to see that Adam isn't the golden child they thought he was." Charles, initially surprised, supported the idea. "I'm on board." Harold maintained his composure, planning to keep up appearances until their anniversary trip. "I'll confront Sandra then and decide what to do after." Everyone agreed, and Linda reminded him, "We love you and are here for you." On the day of the trip, Harold maintained the facade. The night before, Sandra initiated closeness, and Harold responded with aggression, treating her without affection. Afterward, Sandra, satisfied but shocked, asked, "What's gotten into you?" Harold coldly replied, "Just something I needed to get out of my system." As they prepared to leave, Adam and their mother Janet arrived. Adam smirked, making a comment about Rebecca that nearly drove Harold to violence, especially when Adam hugged Sandra inappropriately. Harold restrained himself, knowing he needed to keep the element of surprise. He avoided his mother, knowing any interaction might raise suspicion. After loading the Camaro, they headed to the airport. As Harold gazed out at the island below, hearing the captain announce their landing, he thought about how he would confront Sandra, and whether she would be honest with him. He planned to maintain the facade of a loving husband until then, hoping she would at least tell him the truth. The resort, called the Hidden Treasure, was stunning with beautiful views, luxurious amenities, and perfect settings for couples. Knowing this trip marked the end of his marriage, Harold decided to make the most of it. He and Sandra enjoyed their time, exploring trails, beaches, and nightclubs. On the second night, Sandra seemed happier than ever, and though Harold didn't love her anymore, he decided to be with her one last time. He used her for his own pleasure, feeling nothing, and resolved that it would be the last time. The next morning, Harold woke up and gently nudged Sandra awake. They cleaned up and went to breakfast. As they ate, Sandra said, "Harold, this trip has been amazing. I love you, and when we get home, things will be different." Harold calmly responded, "Sandra, on that we agree." He then pulled out a bundle from a Ziploc bag and placed it on the table. Sandra's face turned white. "Where did you find these?" "In the attic, the day after you said you loved me," Harold replied. Sandra, realizing her nearly 20-year marriage was falling apart, began to cry. I can explain. It was a mistake." Harold laughed bitterly. "A mistake? Forgetting something at home is a mistake. Cheating and having your husband raise another man's child is a choice. At least own up to it." Through her tears, Sandra explained, "It started a year after we began dating. We had an argument and I was upset. Adam came over, comforted me, and we ended up having sex. It was supposed to be just once, but it continued on and off for years. I never meant to hurt you, Harold. I love you." "No, don't say that. You lost the right to use that word with me. Love requires loyalty and respect, which you clearly lack." Sandra cried harder, knowing she deserved his anger. Harold continued, "I saw the DNA test. I know Rebecca isn't mine." Sandra gasped and Harold continued, his voice harsh, "So not only did you betray me with my brother, but you made me raise his child who treated me like dirt. Who is her father?" Harold already knew the answer, but wanted to see if Sandra had any dignity left to be honest with him. Despite everything, a part of him still loved her, but he couldn't stay in a marriage built on lies. Harold asked, his voice cold and demanding, "What is his name, Sandra?" Sandra hesitated before replying, I can't tell you. I'm sorry." Harold didn't respond, just stared at her with a blank expression. He put money down for their drinks, canceled the meal, and walked away without a word. Sandra ran after him, but he ignored her. Back at the hotel, Harold started packing without speaking to her. Realizing he was done with her, Sandra packed as well. Harold caught an earlier flight, leaving Sandra to arrive home 2 hours later. When Harold got home, he found Adam waiting with a smug grin. Before Adam could speak, Harold confronted him, "I know everything about you and Sandra. Get out of my house before I smash your face into my coffee table." Terrified, Adam left immediately. Harold then moved his belongings from the master bedroom to the basement, which he had previously set up as a guest apartment. Sandra watched, realizing too late that her actions had likely ended their marriage. The next day, Harold met with Marcus, Charles, and Linda to discuss the trip and his next steps. He instructed them to prepare everything for Rebecca's 18th birthday party at the Grand Lion Hotel. Marcus would serve as Harold's personal security that night. Marcus revealed more dirt on Adam, including sexual maltreatment claims and shady business practices. He assured Harold that the women were ready to testify against Adam. Impressed, Harold suggested a promotion for Marcus, which brought some lightness to the meeting. But as Harold left, his resolve hardened. He was done shedding tears. Now he had a purpose. Knowing Rebecca was out with his mother and Adam, Harold waited for their return, sitting in the living room with a glass of brandy. When Rebecca arrived, she sneered. "Finally, I can leave that loser in this dump." Sandra tried to correct her. "That loser loves you and raised you. Show some respect." Rebecca rolled her eyes and replied, "Oh please. You've been with my real dad since I was born. It's too late for respect. That loser kept me from Ronnie and I hate him for it." From the shadows, Harold spoke up. "Rebecca, why don't you tell me how you really feel?" Both women froze in terror as they realized Harold had heard everything. Rebecca shrank, realizing her cruel words had been overheard by the very man she had just insulted. "Harold, it's not what you think," Sandra tried to explain. "She just misspoke." "No, she said exactly what she meant," Harold replied, stepping closer. The women huddled together as he continued. I know everything, Sandra. I know Rebecca isn't my daughter but Adam's. I know my mother knew about the affair since Rebecca was 12. You told Rebecca I was having an affair and that Adam was comforting you, all to cover up your own shame. Harold turned to Rebecca. I don't know what I did to make you hate me, Rebecca. I loved you with all my heart. I was there for you when Tommy broke up with you, when you were sick, when you started school. I promised to protect you and show you love, unlike what I experienced from my mother. Rebecca began to cry as he continued. When you were in that car accident, all I cared about was getting to you, hoping you weren't hurt. Harold then looked at Sandra. And you, my love, did you and Adam laugh every time you took him to our bed? Sandra went pale. Before you ask, I have video evidence, Harold said, turning on the TV to show footage of Sandra and Adam together in their marital bed. You spied on me? Sandra asked, irritated. Are you seriously upset that I recorded you cheating in our bed? Harold shot back. Sandra stammered. I can explain. We can work through this. Oh God, no. Harold cut her off. This wasn't a mistake, Sandra. It was a choice over and over again. You slept with my brother, had his child, and made me raise her as mine. Rebecca flinched at Harold's cold words. Harold finished his drink, washed the glass, and reflected on how his marriage was going down the drain. As he put on his jacket and headed for the door, Sandra yelled, Where are you going? We need to talk. This is a family. Harold scoffed. What family? Did you not hear what I just said? I'm leaving because I can't stand the sight of either of you. He slammed the door and drove off, needing to escape. At 10 p.m. he didn't want to go to a bar. He wanted to be with a friend. He knew just where to go. Rose was at home with her 2 new German Shepherd puppies, Lady and Gunter. She had always wanted to be a mother, but bad relationships had left her alone. These puppies were now her companions. When she heard her buzzer, she saw Harold on the door camera and let him in. When Harold arrived, he was heartbroken. Without saying a word, he held on to Rose and cried, finally releasing all the pain and anguish he had been holding in. His family's betrayal, the discovery of the affair.
Now start second story.
I have learned a hard lesson about how easily an average man's daily life can turn into a real mess. When the events in this story began a few years ago, my family consisted of my wife, aged 38, me, Larry Dragon, aged 42, and our children Angelica, 8, and Elliot, 6. Though we weren't the happiest family in our Scandinavian country capital, we managed to keep it together, probably because we believed it was best for our children. Everything began when I met my old classmate from school, Tom Homer, on a Friday after work at the alcohol store. I hadn't seen him in a couple of years, and since the store was rather crowded that day, we had plenty of time to talk. To our surprise, we found out that Tom's wife, Cecilia, worked at the same office where my wife had been for the last 6 months. He asked me, I didn't see you at our wife's Christmas party, but are you coming to their company's old owner farewell party? I told him I would like to come, but I wasn't invited. Tom looked surprised and said, Of course you're invited. All spouses are invited. Why shouldn't you be? I'll ask, and you can be sure about that. See you there, old mate. The reason for the big company party only 2.5 months after the Christmas party was that the old owners had sold their shares to a nationwide investment company and wanted all their coworkers before the new owners took over on March 1st. Of course, I remembered the Christmas party. It was the first Christmas party at her new job, and she had told me she was sorry I wasn't invited. She had bought a new sexy dress for the party, looked very gorgeous when she went there, and came back home at 4 o'clock in the morning in a very tipsy and messy condition. After some arguing, I told her I believed her story about the party and the nightcap afterward at one of her friends' places. She cried and promised me that nothing had happened between her and any man. Of course, I had serious doubts about her story, but without any evidence, what could I do? Back home from my shopping, I immediately told her that I had met my old friend Tom Homer at the alcohol store, and he mentioned that his wife worked at the same company as her. I looked concerned as she replied, What's her name? Cecilia Homer. Do you know her? No, I don't. Did he say she knows me? No, he didn't, but he mentioned that all spouses were invited to your Christmas party. Who the hell pretended to be your spouse at that damn party, and where did you spend that night? She was pale when she replied, I've told you several times that I thought spouses were not invited. I was new there and didn't understand the invitation. So, you were the only idiot at the company who couldn't understand a simple invitation, were you? I promised to find out who messed with you after the party, and you can be sure I'll make him regret his actions when I find him. She began to cry and sobbed. I've told you many times that we were at least 12 to 15 people at somebody's house, just a few drinks and a little dancing. No reason for you to be mad and jealous. There were too many weak points in her story, but without evidence I couldn't go any further. I asked her, am I invited and booked for the next company party? Once again, I noticed a strange expression on her face because she had not mentioned anything about that party to me. But now she knew I knew that all spouses were invited. She replied, of course, I've booked both of us for the party but forgot to tell you about it. I had serious doubts about her telling me the truth. Needless to say, our marriage had turned very chilly, and any thoughts about sex within our relationship seemed like a waste of time. Then things got worse again the next Friday after lunch. I had taken a few hours off from my job to run some errands, and since she usually left her job at 1 o'clock on Fridays, both of us were at home when the phone rang. I took the call and could hear that the caller was in a car with dance music from the radio in the background. The caller hung up without saying anything. When she asked me who it was, I replied, your lover, but he hung up when he heard I answered the call. My reply was intended as an innocent joke, but I saw her freeze for a second before she began shouting, you're totally weird. What the hell are you thinking about me? It was an innocent joke, but now, after your overreaction, I don't know what to think. Was I right? She calmed down and replied in a soft voice, no, you were not right. It was more of your jealous humiliation than a stupid joke, but I'm sorry for losing my temper. I had a terrible day at work today, that's not an excuse, but I hope it explains my bad temper. That evening, I had chosen to wear a much less sexy dress than last time, and was far from being in a jolly mood when we went there. The party was held at one of the best hotels in town, where the dinner was served at several round tables instead of the usual long tables. We were 5 couples at our table, and I got the impression that I knew all the other women. I couldn't help but feel that my presence was a pain in her backside, canceling her plans for the evening. After the meal, when we had coffee and a glass of cognac, the boss came to our table for a little small talk. When he saw me next to her, he said, you must be her husband, we missed you at the Christmas party, sorry you couldn't come. I replied I wasn't invited to that party, at least that's what she told me. He looked at her and asked, all spouses were invited, how could you miss that? I told him she came home very late and a terrible mess, so I'm sure she preferred some standing from the office instead of me. Some of the other couples couldn't resist laughing, and she was red as a tomato. Her boss obviously found the situation slightly unpleasant and said, I don't know anything about that. Before he left our table, I added, you ought to know, there are 304 in all offices, and I began to cry. The other couples found the situation painful as all of them excused themselves and left for the restrooms. I went to the restroom where I talked for a few minutes with one of the other spouses who had been sitting at the same table as us. He told me that his wife had mentioned my wife's noble and old-fashioned sounding surname. He remembered my wife because his wife had spent the whole evening very close to one of her fellow workers at the Christmas party. I had never expected anything like this to happen to me, but I knew that many naive men before me had discovered the painful truth about a cheating wife by accident. It hit me like a hard punch in the belly. I had noticed that the spark between me and my lovely wife had been rare recently, but such ups and downs happen in all marriages sooner or later, so I hadn't worried too much. I was sure that things would brighten up again soon. I didn't see her again until one of her coworkers told me she had left the party and wasn't answering her cell phone. When the babysitter didn't answer our home phone, I understood that she was at home and had paid the babysitter off. I spent some time at the bar, and to my great relief, nobody mentioned it. When I got back home, I found her sleeping in our bed. The next day was the worst of our 11 years as a married couple. I shouted and screamed, but she refused to tell me where she had been or with whom on the Christmas party night. On Monday morning she went to work as usual, and to her great relief, nobody at her job seemed to care about the way I had humiliated her during dinner, not even her boss, who obviously saw it as her private problem. What the coworkers said behind her back was another matter. The next surprise came at bedtime that Friday evening. When she initiated some great sex, she turned out to be very lively in several positions, which gave both of us great satisfaction. It was a huge difference from her usual disinterest. Of course, I suspected that her new interest in sex with me was related to my rude behavior and comments about a lover. I fell asleep immediately after our intensive sex, but I had too many thoughts in my head to fall asleep easily. The main question was, did she prefer me as a caveman rather than the good guy I was before? Nothing special happened over the next 8 days, and I had a sense that our marriage was slowly improving. Then everything collapsed like a house of cards one morning when I saw that she had dressed slightly better than usual and had her hair fixed. During breakfast, she told me she had forgotten to tell me that she might have to work some overtime that day, because her boss had mentioned it the day before. I didn't see any reason to keep quiet about what I thought, so I said, "Since when do you need to dress extra sexy for working overtime? Isn't it better to tell me the truth that you intend to go see your damn lover again?" This took her by surprise, which was clearly visible on her face before she began shouting, "Have you gone completely mad again? You ought to get help for that paranoid behavior. It's better if we end this marriage so you can screw your damn lover as much as you want without doing it behind my back." I'm probably mad, but not so mad that I would stay married to a cheating woman, that's for sure. I began to cry, and even our children started crying loudly. I began thinking about what I had done to my family. I had started the most serious quarrel in our marriage, without having the slightest evidence of her cheating. The only thing I had was the strange feeling I had after a sleepless night. After crying for some time, she sobbed and asked me, "Do you really want a divorce?" I replied, "Yes, I can't see any other solution. If you intend to make a mess of this marriage, it would be best for both of us to split up as soon as possible so we can move on with our lives. I'm fed up with being treated like a fool. Believe me, I've had enough." I rushed back to our bedroom and felt some remorse for accusing her of cheating, even though I didn't have any evidence. I understood that I had acted like a caveman and done everything completely wrong. I should have approached the situation differently by collecting evidence first. When I returned to the kitchen a few minutes later, she was dressed as for an average day. She didn't say anything to me and I didn't know what to say to her. I began to realize that only a miracle could save our marriage. If she was innocent, she could hardly tolerate all the humiliation I had caused her recently. If she was guilty of having an affair, our marriage would be history as soon as I found any evidence. That evening, she told me a story that she had told her boss that I had refused to let her work overtime, and he had accepted that because he knew me from the party. I should have called her boss to verify, but I didn't. To my great relief, I received unexpected help from the new owners who had taken over the company where she worked. Their IT experts conducted a secret investigation of computer use at the office, and found that the average time spent on private matters was as high as 52 minutes per day for each employee. The worst offender had been online for 16 hours during the week that was investigated. The following Monday morning, the entire staff at her office was called to a meeting where they were informed of new rules prohibiting all private use of the internet. The new organization even led to the 4 most recently hired people being let go. She kept her job, but from now on she had to use the PC we shared at home for all her emails. The children had computers, but no internet access. I've always been interested in computer programs and felt that, from now on, we would be playing in my backyard. I was ready for that, and had prepared the computer with a mirror program that saved a copy of everything she did. Another program would retrieve everything she deleted within a few days. She activated a new free email account on her computer for Happy Core Lad, in addition to her old Hotmail address, which she used for innocent chats with some old friends who had left town. The new account had only a few messages. Most were junk mail, but the only messages she sent the first week were completely innocent, informing the Happy Core Lad about her new email account and that she was available online again. Even his first reply, which she had deleted, didn't say much. Great to have my darling online again. One thing was clear, she was involved in something. I hoped to collect useful information, knowing that they could use cell phones for their main connection, especially now that she was limited to using only the computer we had at home. She knew I was keen with computers, but I was sure she would prefer email for all longer messages. I decided that she would never get 50% of our assets if she caused our divorce as a result of her cheating. I had worked hard to gain a fair standard of living for my family, and no lover boy would ever get any of that. Therefore, I began slowly working on a plan to save my money. As the sole owner of our house, I could take a large loan for investments without needing her to sign any papers. To my great surprise, the bank agreed to give me all I wanted. The next day, I told her I had to go to Italy for some final negotiations about purchasing a new machine for my job. She had no objections or questions because I had taken such trips before. The following day, I went to a local travel agency and bought a cheap airline ticket to Malaga, Spain, and had them book a hotel room in the small British territory of Gibraltar. Gibraltar is known for being a major money laundering center in Europe. I even had the travel agency book tickets from Gibraltar to London and from London back home. As expected, she didn't contact my job to verify that I had taken 3 days off. I left for the trip, took a local bus from Malaga to the Spanish border town of La Linea, and then to Gibraltar. But I didn't launder any money. The only thing I did there was a sightseeing trip in and around the famous rock. The next morning I took the first flight to London and then back home. During the trip, I paid as much as possible with my private MasterCard, which would make it easy to trace my expenses if someone wanted to investigate in the future. The only thing I could do for now was to check what she did on her computer. So far, there wasn't much use, only one message from Happy Lad, who told her he was sitting alone in a hotel room and wished she were there to comfort him. She didn't reply to him via email, so I checked her cell phone while she was in the shower, but all messages were deleted as usual. Then, finally, I got a breakthrough. His next email contained useful information. Hi love, sorry I was busy meeting important customers here in the north, a long way from you. During those days your stupid husband was in Italy, I missed your hot lips and sweet box terribly every evening when I knew you were waiting for me. But I have good news for us. Wednesday next week I'll have the whole day off in town, and the only thing booked so far is the dentist between 9 a.m. and about 10 a.m. The rest of the day is ours, just you and me for the whole day, dear. Please take that day off at least from 11 a.m. and be with me. Frederick. Now I knew his name and profession, which gave me a slight hope that she would use email for her reply. She did and wrote. Dear Frederick, of course I'll take the day off after 11 a.m. May I suggest a romantic lunch at your place, so people don't see us together in town when I'm off from my job? I'm sure Larry still suspects something, so our timeout has been the right thing for us to do if we want to keep our love a secret. However, I agree that this one time breaking our timeout will be good. I promise you that I've been thinking about you very often, and am looking forward to our great day. Love, Anne. To my great pleasure, I managed to find an apartment to rent and paid 1 year in advance, just in case I ran into problems with the authorities during my divorce. A salesman named Frederick living in our town wasn't a clue enough to find him, as it was a common name and profession. I suspected he worked for the same company as she did, but I didn't have any further clues. I had a slight chance to tail her to his place. Nowadays, many people prefer to use cell phones for an increasing part of their communication, and apparently, even an inner lover Frederick did so. Since I wasn't able to find any further information on her computer, I prepared for the day. I had emptied our shared and private bank accounts, and the money had been moved secretly from the open market. A van with dark-tinted glass was hired. To my surprise, on her great Wednesday, she acted just as usual in the morning, no sexy dressing and nothing special with her hair. There were no visible signs that she was expecting a great day with her lover. I began to hope that she had cancelled the whole thing. However, I couldn't hide my stress, and she had a worried look on her face when she asked, "Are you all right? You don't look so well." What could I say? I replied, "I'm fine. I've just been thinking about some minor problems I need to fix today, but everything is under control." She replied, "You look so pale." No need to worry. By the way, it would be great to have lunch together today so we can talk about some important matters. Once again, she looked uncomfortable as she replied, "I would like that very much, but I'm sorry, I can't do that because I'm already booked for an important lunch meeting at work today. Tomorrow will be fine." I looked her straight in the eyes and said, "I understand that you must attend to important matters first." Now, even Anne lost the color in her face. Hopefully, she gave a second thought to what nasty things she had planned for the day. Of course, I wasn't far from the truth. The future of our family depended on what she intended to do in the next few hours. I feared that this might be our last family breakfast together, and that our lunch would be cancelled forever. She left for her job and took Elliot with her to his preschool. Angelica went to her school and I stayed home for a while. Once again I had taken a day off from my job. At 10:30, I had the van strategically parked outside her job so I could see both her parked car and the personnel entrance. Thanks to the dark tinted glass, nobody could see me sitting in the seat behind the driver's seat. 5 minutes after 11 o'clock, she went to the parking lot, got into her car and drove straight to a residential area just outside the town center. She parked outside one entrance where she went in. I followed her and saw on the information board inside that Frederick Albinson had an apartment on the second floor. I gave her 5 minutes before I rang her cell phone. She had seen on the caller ID that it was me calling and replied, "And here, what's your problem, Larry?" I said, "My love, you are my worst problem." She sounded surprised when she replied, "Have you gone insane?" "No, my darling, but I have found your lover boy at home now, and you were supposed to be there with him. I'm on my way to beat the crap out of him. Get dressed and move your bum out of his apartment before I get there." She sounded worried but replied, "What are you dreaming about? Of course I'm at my job. If you're telling the truth, that's very good for you, otherwise it will be very bad." I ended the call and was now standing outside Frederick's door with a sledgehammer and a black garbage bag. As I had expected, about a minute later, a man in his mid-30s opened the door. I was ready with my right fist and hit him hard in the face. The surprise made him fall back into his apartment, pale and shocked, and was standing behind him. I told her, "Damn 304, get out of here now at once." Before she could react, I pushed her out of the apartment and locked the door behind her. Alone with Frederick, I attacked him with hard punches from both my fists until he fell to the floor. Under different circumstances, I'm sure this younger man in good shape would have had the upper hand, but his surprise, combined with my rage over my ruined marriage, gave me the advantage. Hitting and kicking him was an easy match. When he lay still on the floor, I took my sledgehammer and destroyed everything of value in the small, simply furnished one-room apartment. It was clear to me that this apartment wasn't his real home, so I took Frederick's cell phone and some papers with his home address and personal information from his briefcase. Still standing outside the door, I rang the doorbell and screamed, "Don't kill him, don't kill him." I opened the door and dragged him back into the apartment. I told her, "Cheating with him is yours now. Screw him as much as you want. I don't care about you any longer." She was shocked again when she saw what I had done to Frederick in his apartment. She began to sob. "Please let me explain. Please listen to me, Larry." I told her to shut up and went out to the van, where I read in Frederick's papers that he worked as a salesman for the same company as and but lived with his family near the national capital. That explained his small apartment in our town. Frederick had destroyed my marriage, and as the Bible says, an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth. I had only one thing to do. First, I called his parents and asked them to take care of our kids after school because I had to work overtime and had some personal problems. They promised to do that. Then I turned off my cell phone and went away for a 2-day leisure trip with the rented van. I regret to say that I can't tell you anything about it in this story because I know this forum has many readers in Scandinavia, probably even those investigating my actions. Innocent people might get into trouble if I said something. Back in my hometown 2 days later, I turned my phone back on and saw and listened to many messages. My only reply to her was a text message saying, "I have filed for divorce, and that is my final decision about our marriage." After that, I spent the rest of the day moving my clothes and other personal things from my house to my new apartment. I left copies of the divorce papers on the kitchen table. Frederick's affair had obviously lasted several months. If it had only been a one-time drunken fling after the Christmas party, there might have been a slight chance to forgive them. Or if what I had said during our last family breakfast had caused her to cancel her date with him, it would have saved Frederick from my severe beating. The next day, I went to my job as usual and was a bit surprised because they didn't call me. My only call regarding Frederick came from the police. They wanted to talk with me. Since both of us had a lot to do, we scheduled a time for 3 weeks later. After lunch, I called Anne's mother, who told me that the children were at her place for a few days, and that Anne had told her she had no objections to the divorce. 3 days later and called and was furious about the fact that our net worth was down to zero. She screamed about suing me for that and for destroying Frederick's home. I told her that lost money could be replaced, but our lost love and crushed family was a much worse matter because it would never be replaced, and was not satisfied with that reply. 3 weeks later, my lawyer and I went to the police. It ended up being a polite conversation, and the lawyer had no objections to anything said there. The police accused me of beating Frederick so badly that he had been unable to work for 2 weeks, and of destroying both his apartment and his house. I denied everything except using self-defense when my wife's angry and desperate lover attacked me while I was interrupting their date. I got the impression that the policeman did his job, but didn't put in any extra effort to prosecute me. Obviously, he had no sympathy for a cheating wife and her lover. I didn't care much because if I were found guilty and sentenced to pay Frederick, it wouldn't benefit him financially. The sentence would only be granting him the legal right to demand payment from me, but if I didn't have any money, it would be his problem, not something the legal system would concern itself with. To my great surprise, Anne contacted me and suggested a meeting about our children at a restaurant. I went there and we managed to keep the meeting civil. She surprised me with a confession about her affair with Frederick, which had begun only a few weeks after she started her new job during a reorganization of the sales department, and had assisted Frederick as his secretary, and there had almost immediately been a tension between them. A lunch in his small apartment had ended up in his bed. They had continued with occasional quickies, but the chances for that were rather few because Frederick made only a few stops at the main office. When Frederick's wife couldn't attend the Christmas party, he saw it as a great opportunity to spend almost the entire night together with Anne. She admitted she had serious doubts but agreed after a while, which she said was the most stupid mistake of her life, and told me that although she had an affair with Frederick the family and I had always been her first choice, she had never reduced her love for me even when I began accusing her of cheating. She said they had planned to end the affair the day I had beaten Frederick. She had already planned how to reward me when she was a faithful wife again, and told me that once Frederick's wife had dumped him, they planned to live together. However, she would immediately end it if I promised to give her a new chance. I said I was sorry, but that had hurt too much. We agreed that she would have primary custody, but the children would be free to see me as often as they wanted. After some hesitation, she asked about the money. I noticed tears in her eyes when I told her that I had lost everything in stupid speculations. That was her price for getting rid of me. I told her that I had paid a much higher price for our separation than she had, because losing my family was a far greater cost than some money, and promised to try to reunite the family as soon as I accepted her apologies and took her back. She didn't look happy when I told her that I preferred a cheating wife as an ex-wife. Before we parted, I warned her that hiring a lawyer to search for the lost money would cost her a huge amount and wouldn't bring anything back. The next Monday morning at work, when my secretary Sarah came in, I immediately noticed something was seriously wrong. She was wearing sunglasses, and when she took them off, I saw a real black eye under her left eye. It looked as if she had cried a lot over the weekend. At first, she refused to tell me anything, but after a few minutes she said, "I'm a single mom now. Daniel and I have split up." I was taken by surprise because I had always regarded Sarah and Daniel as the perfect couple. I asked how come. Sarah replied, "To be hit once by a husband is a terrible experience that can be forgiven as a mistake, but when it happens a second time, it's a bad habit too terrible to be accepted or forgiven. A man who can hit his wife twice will continue to do so for less reason if she doesn't leave him. Daniel hit me for the second time, and I will divorce him. I've always regarded him as a good guy and thought you two were the perfect couple. Why has he turned into such a lunatic?" Sarah answered, "Because he is jealous. The first time he hit me was when I danced a hot tango with a nice South American guy at a wedding. He was a great dancer, but it was only an innocent tango. That made Daniel so mad that he hit me. No other men had any objections when that handsome guy danced with their spouses. I forgave Daniel after a while but told him that the next time would be the last. He promised never to do it again, but he did, and now we're getting a divorce." "Why did he hit you this time?" "Because it's my fault that you have split up." I didn't understand and asked, "How can it be your fault that and screwed that damn Frederick?" "That's far more than I can understand." Sarah explained, "He did it because you and I had an affair." I was so surprised that I shouted, "You and I had what? An affair? Why didn't you tell me when and what? How can I be involved in an affair and not know anything about it? Sarah replied, no, you're not the only one. Neither of us knew anything about that affair, though you and I should have been the first to know. I could hardly believe that a good guy like Daniel had turned into such a madman and caused his lovely beautiful wife to divorce him. Of course, I had admired Sarah as long as I had known her, but I had never harassed her with any sexual comments or suggestions. Though I knew I had preferred Sarah before, and if given the choice, what could I say? I asked her, why didn't he ask me? I have never cheated on him, though I've faced many temptations over the years. Of course, I can't deny that I sometimes envy David for being married to the dream girl, but innocent dreams and nasty actions are two different matters. Where did he get such stupid and wrong rumors from, and why did he believe that crap without trying to find out the truth? Some of David's friends had heard rumors and told him, why didn't he ask you and me? How could he be so incredibly silly? That sounds insane. She asked with disbelief. Incredible. She tried to laugh and asked, now that your dream girl is single, what's the plan, your place or mine? Mine will be fine, I replied. Deal. After an hour, she quietly asked, are you still serious about our date? I gave her my best smile and replied, I don't intend to run away because what you offered me today only happens once in a lifetime. Are you sure that I offered you anything? She asked. No, I said, and I don't demand anything, but a date is a date. Okay, a date will be a date, she agreed. Though we joked about our new single lives, both of us knew that this could be a day when our lives could change in many ways. The tension increased the whole time, and she took the day off after lunch. After work, I did some shopping before heading to my apartment. I didn't expect her to come, but at 6 o'clock, she rang my doorbell with a small overnight bag in her hand. Sarah said, just in case you were serious about our date, I am. It had been a terrible day for her with a meeting with her lawyer. I suggested that she rest while I fixed dinner. After dinner, I comforted her while we were sitting on the sofa, talking about our crushed marriages.
Now start second story.
Dad, it's Mom. Pete smiled as he took the phone from his daughter. He had a pretty good idea of what this conversation was going to be about, but it was his first conversation with his wife that morning, so he was looking forward to it. He heard his wife, Joan, say, hey baby, can my sweet teddy bear oversee a dozen teenagers today? I'd like to think I can handle this. Eva and the girls have been planning this for a couple of weeks, so all I have to do is follow their instructions. She and her friends are 19 or 20, so it isn't like I'm trying to shepherd a bunch of toddlers. She asked, did you get the pool all set up the way I wanted it? He replied, yes, yes. The lounge chairs, the bar, the grill, the food is prepped. I did all that while you've been gone. Next year you get to play chaperone, huh? Don't tell me you haven't been looking forward to this. There will be a dozen teenagers in bikinis around you all afternoon. I'm willing to bet by the time I get home, you'll be all ready for me. Well, don't forget, one of those is our daughter and 2 more of them are like surrogate daughters. I don't need to be around a dozen bikini-clad teenagers to be ready for you. I'm ready for you all the time, every day. I know you are, and I like that, he said. Did you have a good trip? She replied, we did. It was a good learning conference. Joan worked for a mid-sized investment firm in a Nashville, Tennessee suburb. She was a senior investment advisor and had worked there for nearly 6 years. That's great, sweetie. Have a safe trip back from San Jose. Thanks. I'll see you later this afternoon. Love you. Love you too. Eva rolled her eyes at her dad, though truthfully, she was happy that her parents still loved each other as much as they did. She hoped she would be in love with her spouse after 25 years of marriage. Pete was in his own mind for a moment too. Teddy Bear had been his nickname until the kids were born. Then he was Daddy until their oldest went to college. He'd been her teddy bear ever since. He didn't mind it too much. She certainly liked snuggling next to him and told him that she loved sleeping with and next to her teddy bear, so who was he to complain? He and his daughter, along with her 2 best friends, had been busy for a couple of days getting everything ready for the party. It was only 2 weeks before she and her friends' college classes started, junior year for most of them. Eva wanted a big party before they drove off to other parts of the Southeast. She was starting her junior year studying medicine at Vanderbilt University, which is about 20 miles north of her parents' house in Franklin, Tennessee. She lived with her longtime best friends in an on-campus apartment. She was a very cute girl and, like her mother, was about 5 feet 6 inches and curvy. Lily and Carrie, the aforementioned best friends, spent the night and had been helping that morning. Lily was a tall, slender, and very attractive African American with very pretty light pecan brown colored skin and wonderfully long curly hair. At 5 feet 10 inches, she was a good inch taller than Pete, which she teased him about mercilessly. He didn't mind. He loved her and loved having her around. She was like a sister to Eva and another daughter to him. She and his daughter had been as thick as thieves since 3rd grade. She was on a track and field scholarship at Vanderbilt, which paid for a portion of her tuition. She ran the 800 meters, 1,500 meters, and the mile. When she was younger, she would run some with Pete, but as she got older, he told her he couldn't run with her anymore because he was holding her back. She missed running with him. She was a very smart young lady and was majoring in math and computer science. Carrie, Eva's other best friend, was the first friend Eva made on her first day of elementary school. Carrie had dropped her sandwich that their housekeeper had made for her, and Eva gave her half of hers because her parents had always taught her to help others. When Lily came along, they became their version of the Three Musketeers because they were nearly inseparable. Carrie only scored 1330 on her SATs, but with her parents' money and old money connections, she still got into Vanderbilt. They teased her that she could have scored 600 and still would have been admitted as a prank in high school. Rather than being voted most likely to succeed or some other useless award, she was voted most likely to buy an island. She was a little blonde doll with a cute figure on her tiny 5 feet 2 inches frame. They were a good group, well, like three sisters, and Pete loved having them there with him under the backyard pavilion and outdoor kitchen attached to the side of the 2-story pool house, most of which he had built over the years. They had the table ready to serve lunch, and the rest of their friends should be showing up any minute. It was a gorgeous August day. The lounge chairs were set up, the pool was clean, and Pete had mowed and manicured the yard. Eva seemed to have inherited her mother's organizing and event planning abilities, and had kept her father moving for the last 2 days. She was his little girl, and she bragged about him when she had the chance. He tended to be more bashful than boastful, confident in his capabilities, but not one to brag. She guessed building and running his small consulting firm would do that for some men, not that what other men did mattered to her. She knew the fathers of most of the girls coming over, and if there were a vote among them as to who had the best dad, hers would likely get a majority of first-place votes. After helping serve a lavish spread of food and non-alcoholic drinks, Pete said, "Okay ladies, I'm going back inside. Let me know if you need anything." Lily asked, "Are you sure you don't want to stay out here and eat with us?" "Thanks, Lily, but this is for all of you to enjoy." "I'm good. This afternoon is for you girls only." He had kept himself busy in his office, from which he could see the pavilion and a portion of the pool. Once the girls started taking off their cover-ups and clothes to reveal their swimsuits, he moved to the den to watch the Braves lose another game, because he didn't want to appear to be a creeper. He had been watching for about 20 minutes when he heard a commotion out by the pool. Standing to investigate, he saw a large young man grabbing Carrie's wrist and trying to pull her away from her friends, who had surrounded them and were yelling for him to stop. Pete ran outside, and as he approached the group he yelled, "Hey, a-hole, let her go." The big guy, probably around 6 feet 3 inches, saw Pete and smirked, not even bothering to slow down as he dragged a resisting Carrie toward the exit. Little Carrie didn't even weigh 115 pounds, and he was probably twice her weight. As Pete got closer, the a-hole pushed Lily out of the way. As she stumbled, Pete tried to catch her, but with her tall frame she bumped into his nose hard. For a second he saw stars, but then he recovered and ran to get between Carrie and the intruder at the gate leading toward the driveway. "Let me go," Ricky yelled. "Girls, get back," Carrie shouted. All the other girls moved away from the 3 people involved in the altercation, but didn't go far, some had their phones out filming. "I said let her go, a-hole," yelled Pete. He stepped in close to Ricky, who thought that having a 60 or 70-pound advantage meant he didn't have to worry much about Pete. Since his right hand was holding Carrie's wrist, he tried to throw a left jab at Pete. That was his first mistake. Pete dodged low and, with some momentum behind him, delivered a solid punch into Ricky's solar plexus. A big whoosh of air rushed out of his mouth as he hunched back, absorbing the blow and releasing Carrie. Not wasting any time, Pete put a hard knee into Ricky's groin, which took him down to his hands and knees. "Get the hell out of my backyard, a-hole," Pete shouted. Ricky slowly got to his feet and said, "You aren't as big as my old man said you were. I'm going to enjoy slapping you around." The big guy prepared to take another swing at Pete, but it was so telegraphed that Pete had to wait before responding. It was clear this guy didn't have any training. Thankfully, as Pete ducked under the big roundhouse right hook, he put his right foot behind Ricky's right leg and shoved as hard as he could. Ricky was already off balance from the missed swing, and he fell backward over Pete's leg, landing with a hard thud on his back. When Pete said, "Just leave, I don't want to have to hurt you," several of the young ladies giggled at the shorter man threatening the outmatched giant. Those giggles didn't help as Ricky climbed to his feet and said, "You move pretty well for a teddy bear, but my dad calls you a little teddy bear." Pete wondered where he got his information and how he knew about Ricky. Ricky came at him again, but now Pete was getting pissed. He knew he needed to end this before he lost his temper and lost control. Ricky tried to fake a right jab but did it poorly. When he threw a left jab, Pete dodged it. What Pete was waiting for came next, another right hook that seemed to start down in Birmingham and slowly whizzed by Pete's head. As Ricky's arm went past Pete's head, Pete stepped in and delivered a devastating combination to Ricky's right side, where his kidney and liver were located. Pete thought that was probably the hardest he had ever hit anyone with his hands. Ricky dropped like a stone. It took a solid 45 seconds just to get to his hands and knees. Nobody was giggling anymore as he pushed himself onto his knees and prepared to stand. Pete grabbed one of Ricky's hands, bent it behind his back and put enough pressure on his fingers to almost break them. Once on his feet, Pete marched Ricky through the still open gate and pushed him out onto the driveway. After Pete let him go, Ricky was moving like an old crippled man, holding his side. Ricky had had enough fighting, but he wasn't done talking. "You may call your wife your sweetie, but my dad calls her his sweet kitty," Ricky said, smirking. Surprised? "Just because she tells you she's traveling doesn't mean she is. Sometimes they stay in town so she can enjoy his big tool uninterrupted for a couple of days close to home." Pete said, "You're right. If you want to keep talking smack about my wife, we can step back into the backyard. Keep yapping, a-hole. Anyway, I wouldn't believe you even if you said you had proof. Now that you're embarrassed, all you have is lies." "Oh, we'll see about that. I'll believe it when I see it in my hand," Ricky replied, pointing to Pete's hand. "Even then, you'll probably have someone fake it." Ricky just smirked at Pete and, looking around, found Carrie's Mercedes. He banged the hood of her SUV hard enough to dent it. It was then that Pete finally noticed the sounds from the other girls yelling and gesturing at the young man. He had been so focused a few moments ago that he hadn't heard them. Ricky slumped into his BMW and left. When Pete turned around, he saw several young ladies making very unladylike gestures toward Ricky and several cell phones filming the activities. Pete said, "Come on ladies, the show is over. Back inside. Also, please do not share that video with anyone yet. Let's talk about it for a few minutes first, okay?" He heard Eva say, "Daddy, your nose is bleeding." In the next instant, Lily was barking orders to everyone to make room for Pete on a chaise lounge under one of the umbrellas. "Eva, go get him a clean shirt. Carrie, go get him a bag of ice." She got him sitting down and began pulling his shirt off to hold against his nose. The remaining 10 girls all got a really good look at this very fit and lean man in his late 40s. They never would have expected what they had just witnessed. At that moment, Pete had nearly a dozen bikini-clad nurses ever so willing to help him, though with Lily running things that was unlikely to happen. One of them ran to the pavilion to get him something to drink. Another was trying to ease him back so he could lie down, and the rest were chattering away about what had happened and staring at Pete. When Carrie and Eva returned, Pete put the ice on his nose and asked, "Who the hell was that a-hole? Who raises a piece of crap like that?" "Carrie, what did he want with you?" Eva stepped in to answer. "That a-hole, as you like to call him, is Ricky Farmington, the son of Andrew Farmington, Mom's boss." "Oh, those earlier accusations just went from some stupid kid talking smack to maybe a stupid kid who knows something," Pete said, trying not to let his concern show. Carrie said, "The reason he was after me was because we went out one time a couple of weeks ago, and when he asked me out again I declined. I tried to do it nicely but he wasn't very nice about it. I'm sorry he came here." I'm not sure how he found me, but I'm guessing one of the crew here put today's party on social media. She looked at her friends and pleaded, "Please stop doing that." Then, looking back at Pete, she asked, "Mr. Clark, how did your nose start bleeding? He never touched you." Pete said, "I think that was from when I tried to catch my other daughter, Lily. She fell into me and the side of her head hit my nose." He smiled at Lily. "I'm so sorry, Dad." Lily said, "When he pushed me you were so close and when you tried to catch me we got tangled up. I didn't mean to bump your nose." Pete squeezed her hand. "Don't worry, it wasn't your fault. It doesn't feel broken, just sore." Worried about the videos, Pete said, "I know this is asking a lot of all of you, but please don't share a video of what happened with anyone outside of this group. No posting to social media, no emails, no texting to your friends, nothing. Please." "Why, Daddy? You didn't do anything wrong," Eva said. "From the looks of things, you could have really hurt him if you wanted to," said a curious Eva. Pete replied, "In the first place, I don't want any of those smears regarding your mother being posted out there. We know they aren't true, but they still wouldn't sound good. Also, someone with that kind of temper could try to retaliate against Carrie or me or any of us if that video were posted online or started getting around. Don't you see? You would be embarrassed and want some payback. He still might, but I'd hate for one of you to be leaving a movie theater or college class at night and have him sneak up behind you and hurt you because he was angry and stupid or drunk. Sure, he'd be arrested later, but with a temper like that he could be dangerous and do some permanent damage." Eva asked, "Are you going to call the police?" "I'm afraid so. We don't have to decide about pressing charges right now, but he assaulted Carrie and Lily and tried to assault me," Pete said. A couple of girls giggled at Ricky's attempt to assault the smaller man. He also damaged the hood of Carrie's SUV, not to mention trespassing and probably other things. "I'll get someone to come out and take our statements. It shouldn't take long. I'm sorry, but we need to do this. You can still lay out by the pool and enjoy your party," Pete said. He asked Carrie, "Is your wrist all right?" "Yeah, I think so. He grabbed it pretty hard so it might bruise but nothing else." Pete nodded. Carrie then asked, "Mr. C, where did you learn how to do that? Ricky is a big guy and in good shape. I know he's won several fights. It's kind of boring. Are you sure you want to hear this?" A dozen bikini-clad ladies nodded their heads up and down. Not a bad sight to watch. Pete shrugged. "When I was in high school, I was teased occasionally about my height. Both of my parents are short too, so I knew that wasn't likely to change. I was always in good shape because I ran track in junior high and later cross-country in high school. I was pretty good too, competing in the state finals. But one night when I was a junior I had a date with a nice girl, and as we were leaving the movie theater, a couple of big a-holes like Ricky wanted to harass us. They did for a minute, and I tried to ignore them and push my way through. Being on a date, I didn't want to start anything, so I let them push me a little. Fortunately, I had a couple of friends who were there too. They saw what was going on, joined us, and the two a-holes left. We finished our date and I went home. I was more than a little angry. I told my dad about it, and the next day he found a martial arts studio for me near our home in Knoxville. He told me to be the best I could be, but if I ever got good, not to go looking for trouble. Defense only for me and others. I promised, and I took 2 lessons every week until I went to college at Georgia Tech. While in college in Atlanta, I found a studio that taught several disciplines including Silat, a close combat style, as well as Judo and Jiu-Jitsu. They didn't adhere to any single style, and their focus was on self-defense. I trained there for my 4 years in college. The instructor was a really old guy about my height, and his daughter was about Eva's size in her late 30s. He led the school along with his daughter, and she was the most amazing fighter I've ever seen, fast, fearless, and deadly. I watched her spar against big, fast guys with black belts, and it was rare that they ever laid a hand on her. And when they did, they usually wished they hadn't. I knew I wanted to learn from her, so for 4 years I took 2 to 4 lessons per week. I was pretty good for a while, he said modestly. When I married Joan, we still lived in Atlanta, but I cut back to 1 lesson per week. The entire time we've been married, she's never seen me in a match. She knows I practice in her basement gym, but that's it." Eva said, "Daddy, I never knew. You didn't need to, sweet pea. Do you remember when we took you and Donnie to Paris when he was in 9th grade and you were in 7th grade? She nodded. Do you remember that night we drove out to that Moroccan restaurant in the shady-looking section of the city? She nodded again. I told your mother that I didn't want to go there because I thought it wasn't a safe place to go at night. Of course, she disagreed. The discussion was a little heated after a while, but I finally relented like I usually do. It was a great restaurant and I enjoyed it, but do you remember what happened on our way back to the car? Eva answered, those two guys, a tall one and a short one, came up behind us and yelled at us to stop. You gave Mom the car keys and told her to take us to the car, start it, and begin honking once we were inside. That's right. While the three of you got away, I was planning to stop them or slow them down. If I wasn't there right away, I knew she would call the police. I wondered how long it would have taken for them to show up in that part of town. After you guys left, the tall one pulled out a knife and said, money. I doubt he spoke much English besides that. I held my hands up like I didn't want any trouble, but eventually he got close enough that I had to take him on. I kept him between me and the short guy. Pretty quickly, I took his knife from him and put it into the side of his knee. I'm surprised you guys didn't hear the scream he let out. When the short guy pulled his own knife, I hit him and his knife fell away from us. The tall guy's screaming aroused the curiosity of several of their friends who started running toward us. At this point, I started running toward the car, hoping you guys were in it. I felt in control with the first two guys, but with 6 or 7 more coming my way, I thought discretion was the better part of valor, so it was time for me to leave. I sprinted toward the car, and when I heard the horn, I made a beeline for it. Your mother had pulled onto the street and was ready to go. I hopped into the front seat and told her to punch it. Since she and I have been married, that is the only other time I've faced anything like that before today. That was a little fib. What he didn't tell them was that one time after Donnie and Eva were born, just before they moved to Nashville, he and Joan were out dancing one night when they still lived in Atlanta. One of her former boyfriends from college, Bobby Taylor, who was then an Atlanta Falcons football player, approached them. Joan didn't think anything of it, but when he asked Joan to dance and she accepted, Pete was fuming. They only danced for a few minutes, but later when Pete saw Bobby go into the restroom, he followed him. The jock, a wide receiver about the same height as Ricky, smirked at Pete and started making comments about how he missed Joan and maybe they would dance a little more that evening. Pete wasn't in the mood, and as the old flame tried to push Pete out of the way to leave the restroom, Pete put him on the floor hard. The big guy fell at an odd angle, landing on his arm and breaking his own bone at the elbow, which ended his playing time for that season. The Falcons brought in a replacement who did so well that Bobby was later traded to another team. No charges were filed. Pete continued with Eva's friends, so please everyone, don't send that video to anyone. By the end of the day there should be exactly 13 copies, including me, and never more than that. They all promised Pete they wouldn't send it to anyone. He hoped they meant it. I know this kind of dampens the mood, but you shouldn't let it. He's an a-hole. Forget him, Lily said. You mean he's an a-hole? Pete smiled and some of the girls laughed. He stood and returned inside to call the police. When the officer arrived, he was greeted by all those lovely ladies in their swimsuits. They quickly covered up, and he asked them to explain what happened. He examined Carrie's wrist, noting it was still red, but no more injured than that. Pete's nose had stopped bleeding and he had changed. Carr's mom had come over because her dad wasn't back yet from a trip. The entire discussion only took 30 to 40 minutes. Once the police car pulled away, the party resumed. Carrie hugged her mom and watched her drive away. Eva came up to Pete and asked, Dad, would you mind if we stayed here until we go to Cars? We planned on going out dancing after dinner, but after this afternoon, we prefer to dance here tonight. It's your house, Eva. You know I don't mind. I love having you here, Pete replied. She hugged her father and returned to her friends. Pete caught the last inning of the Braves game. They were losing, of course. While watching, he received a text from Joan. Plane was delayed. We'll be home late. He sighed. That little seed of doubt was starting to bother him, and he hated that some of Ricky's words were too close to home. He needed his wife to get home so they could talk. Pete danced with a few more of Eva's friends, or more accurately, they danced with him. They tried to teach him the electric slide again, but he couldn't quite get it right, which amused everyone, including Pete. Around 10 p.m. they needed to get to Cars, whose huge house had a ton of bedrooms. Pete received very nice hugs, kisses, and thank yous from all the young ladies as they left. Having had a little help, it didn't take much to clean up outside. As he was putting the last of the trash into the bins, he heard the garage door open. Joan was home. He walked out to help her with her bag. She gave him a big hug and a quick kiss on the lips. As he approached, she said, "I missed you, baby. How was the party?" "It was interesting. I'll tell you about that in a minute. They just left to go to Cars for the night." "Oh, I thought they were going out dancing." "They decided to dance here." "I'm sure you minded that. Did you turn off the lights and watch them from inside?" That irritated him a bit, but he replied no. "Lily pulled me outside with her and I danced with most of them before they left." "Well, I'll bet you were in quite the mood. If I weren't so wiped out from the cross-country flight and the delays, I'd be happy to take care of you." Pete wasn't really in the mood either. He said, "Let me get your bag inside and I'll pour you a glass of wine. I have quite the story to tell you." She was curious about what had happened and followed him in. Once he returned to the living room, she was sipping her wine and watched him sit across from her rather than by her. "Oh, this must be serious." She snickered. Pete proceeded to describe what happened, including calling the police, but leaving out the dialogue from Ricky. She was shocked that someone could be so brazen as to barge into their backyard and act so aggressively. Then Pete revealed the name of the assailant. "His name is Ricky. Ricky Farmington." "Andrew's Ricky." Shock and then disbelief crossed Joan's face. "No way. I cannot believe he would do that. There must be some mistake." Pete said clearly Andrew forgot to teach him a few things. Then he thought to himself, like manners, respect, how to fight and when to keep his big trap shut. Joan thought for a second. "Wait a minute. Rick's huge. You mean to tell me that you took him out of the backyard like trash?" She giggled for a moment, then giggled some more, and then she started laughing. "What?" she said. "You're making this up, right? My husband, all 165 pounds, took out that tank? He looks like he's almost twice your size. Okay, what's the joke?" Pete was not as amused. She could see his disappointed expression and said, "Oh, come on, Pete. I'm not trying to hurt your feelings, but be realistic here." Pete stood and said, "Good night, Joan. Don't pout, sweetie." "I don't mean it badly," she said. How else could he take it? "I'll be there as soon as I finish this glass." She was shocked when he replied, "Don't bother." While Joan went into the kitchen to put her glass in the sink, she called to him, but he didn't reply. When she got upstairs to their bedroom, he wasn't there. He was in a guest room. She asked, "Pete, what are you doing here?" "I missed you and was planning on snuggling with my teddy bear tonight." Teddy bear? Now he wondered about the origin of her using that pet name. Was it a term of endearment or derision? He could blow up over her use of the term right then, but he was emotionally exhausted and wanted a clear mind to think things through in the morning. He said, "Well then, I guess we'll both be disappointed." He closed the door and locked it. After a few minutes of knocking and pleading, she finally left and went to their bedroom, confused by the turn of events. Her husband must be losing his mind, she thought. She considered texting her daughter to find out more but decided against it. It was late and she would see her in the morning. Besides, there was no way her husband could do what he claimed. It wasn't possible. The next morning, Pete knew she would sleep late after the long flight and being on West Coast time for a couple of days. He wondered if she even went on the trip, which irritated him because now he was questioning everything. He snuck into their bedroom, retrieved some clothes for running and later changed for his run. After eating a small breakfast, he went for a long run 7 miles in just under 53 minutes. When he returned, Joan did not look happy. "Missed you. We need to talk." "I don't think you gave me the whole story last night," she said. He ignored her and went to the shower. She followed, but once in the bathroom he locked the door behind him. She beat on the door, but he continued with his shower and shave. Once dressed and feeling refreshed, he prepared to face his wife. He went downstairs to his home office. She was already waiting for him. "Andrew called me this morning. I'm not sure I got the entire story last night. Ricky had blood in his urine and had to go to the emergency room yesterday. Couldn't happen to a nicer guy," Pete said. "Ricky told Andrew that he was here just talking to Carrie when out of nowhere you came up behind him and hit him in the back with something." They think you bruised a kidney. Andrew wants to file charges. Pete replied, "Why am I not surprised that the little a-hole is lying about the incident? He's probably embarrassed that your little teddy bear threw him out, as you said, like garbage." Andrew's very angry. "Why did you do that? Why did you attack him?" "The reason I attacked that poor boy was because he was attacking Carrie. You know, Carrie that we love like our own daughter and have for over a decade. The Carrie that we took with us in Eva and Lily to Spain for 2 weeks to celebrate Eva and their high school graduation. That same Carrie was being dragged out of our backyard by that disrespectful piece of trash, and I put a stop to it." "Are you saying you believe their story and not your husband? Do you believe I sucker punched him?" Joan said, "I'm sorry, Pete. No way could you do that face to face." Pete wanted to throw in her face how in the hell that stupid kid knew the things he knew. Pete was furious but had to.
Now start second story.
As I drove to work, I thought again about the conversation my wife had initiated last night during dinner. This wasn't the first time it had come up, but the frequency of these conversations seemed to be increasing, and I wasn't exactly sure why. I didn't understand why this discussion kept resurfacing, and why it was important to my wife. She wanted me to tell her again how many women I had slept with before we became exclusive. She wanted to know if I fantasized about past women or thought about them when we were making love. Obviously, the only answer I could give to that question was a resounding hell no. My wife and I had been married for 5 years, and although it might not have been a perfect marriage, I would rate it very high in terms of trust, respect, love, sex, and friendship, in short, all the things I deemed important in a relationship. I thought my wife felt the same way, and I truly believed we were living the dream: decent income from enjoyable jobs, a good marriage, a nice house in a good location, and enough money and leisure time to go on vacations, enjoy good wine, food, and entertainment. My name is William Harrison, but my friends call me Billy. My wife's name is Molly. I'm a 5 feet 11 inches blonde-haired, blue-eyed male of Nordic descent, although I have enough Irish in me to fuel my occasional explosive anger. That has been under control since my high school days, having learned through multiple fights that it's better to use words than fists. I'm in pretty decent shape, having grown up playing soccer and hockey year-round and spending a lot of time in my basement lifting weights. I still jog, play in an adult soccer league, and enjoy some pond hockey. My wife Molly has always had a natural sex appeal, with sparkling eyes, perfect skin, and lips that draw you in when she smiles or talks. She has an easy way of making people feel comfortable, and can get them to talk about virtually anything. She shows friends and coworkers how important they are to her by being a good listener and not judging them. Sometimes this can border on flirting or being too open and comfortable, but it's never been an issue for me. She has a knack for stopping conversations before questionable behavior lines are crossed. Molly attracts plenty of attention, not just because of her sex appeal and bubbly personality, but also due to her enviable figure. She is 5 feet 7 inches tall, with blonde hair, blue eyes, and an amazing physique. Perhaps the crowning achievement is her perfectly shaped, firm legs. She spends 4 to 5 nights a week at the gym to keep herself toned, and it's her main source of enjoyment outside of work. I often told her that I had to resist the urge to grope her every time she walked by, and she had no problem with that. When I really thought about it, Molly seemed to have the perfect personality, at least perfect for me. She had one sometimes annoying fault that occasionally led to emotional discussions between us, but rarely escalated into a fight. The problem was that once Molly made up her mind about something, she wouldn't let go of her decision. She believed she was right, especially in situations that lacked scientific or black and white data. This made her particularly stubborn on some issues, and I typically couldn't change her once it was made up. We had both married right out of college and had exclusively dated for the last 2 years of college. So it's fair to say that Molly hadn't experienced a myriad of different sexual partners before we got married. On the other hand, I had gone pretty wild during my senior year, the summer of high school, and the first 2 years of college, betting as many women as possible. I felt fortunate that one of my first sexual partners was an older, divorced woman who loved sex and had a lot of experience with it. She taught me many things about pleasing a woman, and what really works in getting a woman to orgasm. Thanks to her, I felt very comfortable ensuring I was pleasing the woman first, only taking my relief when I had made the experience special for them. I had explained this to Molly when she asked how I knew how to please her and give her such pleasure. She was thankful for what the long list of women had taught me but was jealous that she had missed out on different partners and sexual experiences. In our professional lives, I was a mechanical engineer at Abbott Labs, helping design and test various injection-molded components used in medical devices such as ventilators, pumps, and respirators. I liked the job as it was challenging but not overly stressful, and it afforded me enough money and leisure time to pursue other hobbies. My latest hobby was gutting and restoring a 2005 Winnebago B-Class RV that Molly and I could take on week-long trips up the north shore of Lake Superior in Minnesota, or to the mountains and the ocean. There were no limits to the great choices. Molly was a CPA with a good job at one of the top 5 national accounting and consulting firms. The job had good pay, wasn't overly stressful, and included some travel. This sometimes involved accompanying a junior CPA on company audits to ensure they were covering all the bases correctly, and that they were trained in the company's way of providing customers with good service and insightful reporting. Molly had been on a few trips in the last month with a new young employee named Andrew who had just graduated from school and was beginning his 3-year stint to qualify for the CPA designation. Molly had once mentioned how hot, confident, and outgoing he was after their first trip, but she hadn't said much about him since then. Our life continued with me spending more and more time on the RV. As I got closer to completion, my excitement to hit the road with Molly increased. I did notice that Molly wasn't as outwardly excited about the whole thing, which somewhat concerned me, but I figured that after 1 or 2 shorter road trips, she would love it. I also noticed that Molly wasn't quite as bubbly, outgoing, and open in her communication and relationship with me. The sex was still great and hadn't diminished. A few times in the last few weeks when Molly came home late from work, she had practically ripped my clothes off and dragged me into bed. The last time this happened, I noticed her panties were wet when we got undressed, and I could tell something was really making her incredibly horny. After one of these intense lovemaking sessions that had occurred right after work, I went down to start making us dinner while Molly jumped into the shower. I decided that things had been off in a few ways in the last few weeks, and I was going to ask Molly about it when she came down to eat. Molly sat under the hot water in the shower and felt great about the lovemaking she and I had just shared. However, a twinge of guilt and apprehension also came over her. She had been going to lunches and the occasional happy hour with her coworker Andrew, and most recently she had allowed him to talk her into going to dinner and dancing. She knew this was pushing boundaries farther than she should be allowing, and their conversations were getting more flirtatious, crossing the line of what a married woman should permit. Even here, she was kidding herself, she was obsessed with this secret liaison and the idea of sex with a different man. She knew she was very physically attracted to him, and had decided last week to have sex with him. I deserve this, and it's gonna help me get this obsession out of my mind and get me back on track in my marriage, she thought. Billy had had a ton of sexual partners, granted all before they decided to be exclusive, and she knew he would never cheat on her and she would never cheat on him. But she had made up her mind to have one weekend of sex with Andrew, and was trying to figure out how to discuss it with Billy. She loved him so much and never wanted to hurt him, so she would never do anything behind his back. But she reasoned that this was only sex, only one time, and if Billy loved her as much as she knew he did, he would allow this, and they would get past it and become stronger than before. She only hoped she wasn't kidding herself, but her mind was made up. When Molly came down to the kitchen, I had made shrimp salads, some cornbread, and poured a couple of glasses of wine. When she sat down, I said, "Molly, we need to talk about something and I'm not sure how to start." "Billy, just go ahead and say what's on your mind. I love you, you love me, and we can tell each other anything. I also need to talk to you, but why don't you start?" "Oh, Molly, that sounds a bit ominous. How many marriages begin with the need to talk opener?" "Don't be silly, Billy. This isn't anything bad. This is something that will be good for me, and I'll make it really good for you too." "Well, I'm not sure how to say this or what I'm trying to ask, but Molly, something is off with us. You haven't been as open and loving in the last several weeks as we normally are." "Man, Billy, did you forget about the incredible lovemaking we just had?" "Molly, I'm not talking about that. But since you brought it up, what made you so incredibly horny that you almost tore my clothes off?" Molly instantly got a bit tense, and a look of concern and guilt crossed her face. "Well, Billy, if you don't like me being that horny for you, then maybe it's your problem and not mine." I instantly noticed the defensive attitude and called her on it. "Molly, I see your look of concern and guilt, and your defensive attitude is obvious. Can't you see it? Can you please tell me what is really going on? Do I have something to be concerned about with you? Molly looked down, realizing that she had let the conversation get off on the wrong foot, and needed to regain control to have a constructive discussion with a positive outcome. Billy, I'm sorry. That isn't what I meant to say. I do need to tell you what's going on. I need you to know and remember that I love you and our life more than anything else. What we have is precious and I am so in love with you. So please remember that as we talk. Molly, now you've really got me worried. Are you having an affair? Are you cheating on me? Billy, how dare you say that? You know I would never cheat on you. I respect you too much. But I do want to talk with you about something, and I need you to listen to me and hear what I'm saying. When I'm done, you can ask me any questions and we can discuss it, okay? Honey, again, I'm going to remind you that I love only you and want only you. I want to have kids with you, grow old with you, and always be your partner. What I'm going to tell you might be hard, but please listen to it all. Do you remember me talking about Andrew, my coworker that I took a few trips with? Well, I've also been having lunch with him, and we've gone to happy hour and even to dinner last week. What the hell, Molly? You said you weren't cheating on me or having an affair and now you're admitting to one. I am not. Damn it, it isn't an affair and I have never cheated on you. But you promised to listen. Yes, maybe I have crossed the line by spending time with him and telling you about it. I certainly don't love him, but we have been flirting, and the things we've been saying and sharing have been full of sexual innuendo. It seemed a bit risque but still innocent. Only that changed when he told me that he wanted to make love to me. He is 7 years younger than me, extremely fit and handsome, and I have found myself totally infatuated with him. I jumped up in a rage. God damn it, Molly, are you leaving me? Do you love him? Are you sure you haven't already slept with him and this is a way to tell me? Molly cringed at what she had said and how none of it was coming out the way she intended. Billy, no, I haven't slept with him or anyone else. That's actually part of the problem. But please listen. I love only you. Andrew is just a kid. I could never fall in love with him. But you know that I have had only a few sexual experiences before meeting you, and I feel like I was deprived of some of the experiences you got to sample before we were a couple. I kind of feel like I was cheated out of sowing some wild oats before we fell in love. And now, knowing that this young man that I am incredibly attracted to wants to be with me, I just can't get it out of my mind. Today at work, Andrew and I were flirting back and forth, and that is partially the reason I was so incredibly horny when I got home and needed you to love me. I felt my pulse speed up and my skin flush as I got an incredibly sad and shocked look on my face. This was not what Molly wanted to see. She quickly tried to correct her last statement. Billy, I didn't say that right. I love you and making love to you is so much more than sex. It is the most fulfilling thing I have ever felt. But I can't get this young man out of my system, and I have decided to have sex with him. I want to take this one-time opportunity to get my last sexual experience with another man before we get more serious about kids, careers, etc. I feel like I deserve this and I am asking you to let me have it. I have told you I would never cheat on you and I respect you. That is all true, and that's why I am asking you to let me have this. But I guess I am also telling you that I have made up my mind to do this. Molly was stunned to see me slump in my chair and to see tears fill my eyes and start to slide down my cheek. This wasn't how this was supposed to go. It was only going to be sex just one time. It wouldn't mean anything. She had to convince me. Billy, I love only you. I only want to be married to you and grow old with you. This is only sex. It isn't love. It's only a one-time hall pass to have a sexual experience and get it out of my mind. I swear I will make this up to you for the rest of our lives if you just let me have this. I will never cheat on you, and that's why I am begging you to allow me this one-time gift and proof of your love for me. I jumped up from the table, and the hurt and anger in my eyes alarmed Molly. I hoped she wondered if she had already done something to hurt our marriage and relationship. How could she possibly equate my approval with being proof of my love? What utter nonsense. Proof of my love for you, Molly? Here is what I am hearing. You have already cheated on me. You are having an emotional relationship with someone from work. You've talked intimately with this person, shared details about us and our marriage, and gone to lunches, dinners, and happy hours together. To me, that's already cheating. Are you sure you haven't slept with him already, And this is how you're trying to tell me you're having an affair? Besides, how will you make it up to me? Have more sex with me, spend time with me, shower me with gifts? Aren't you supposed to be doing that right now? Billy, stop. It isn't an affair, and no, I haven't slept with him. But I will admit that I kissed him a few times after happy hours. Maybe it was the alcohol, but I have to admit the thrill of someone different turned me on. This is going to be a one-time sexual experience, not an affair. I'll never love him and I'll always love only you, but I feel like I need this. If you loved me as much as I thought you did, you would give me this. Billy, it's only sex. It's not love. It doesn't mean anything, but I can't get it out of my mind. I feel I need this. I don't know right now what I will do, but I will make it up to you. Molly, I can't believe you can even ask me this. You have already disrespected me by having an emotional and sexually oriented relationship with this guy. You've already cheated on me by talking about sex and what you want to do with each other. You told me you kissed him, and to me, that's as intimate as if you had slept with him. I guess I also can't believe how naive I have been. I thought you loved me as much as I loved you, but I would never hurt you like you just hurt me. I don't even know if you understand how much you have already hurt our relationship and marriage. I thought I could always count on you and trust you, and now you've thrown that feeling out the window. Billy, stop. Quit being so dramatic. I do love you and only you. You can trust me, and that's why I'm telling you this. You shouldn't be hurt. This is just about me, not about us. It's just meaningless sex, okay? Molly, then maybe I'll go find myself some meaningless sex too, and you can see if you still believe that. With that, Billy stood up, grabbed his keys, and walked to the door. Billy, goddammit, grow up and come back here. This isn't a bad thing. This is going to make me better after this, and allow me to give you more love and attention in our future than I ever have. Screwing a man who is not your husband will make you better. Holy moly, you are really delusional right now. I don't know how you can believe what you're trying to sell. I don't know how you can say you love me and then treat me like I'm just supposed to suck up your infidelity and get over it. Well, guess what? I will never get over it if you go ahead with this. We are over. Do you understand that? With that, I started to cry and ran to the door, out to my car, and was backing out of the driveway before Molly got to the door and called out to me. Billy, no, please come back and let me show you how much I love you. We can get past this. Billy, it will be good for me and I'll make it so good for you. All I could do was look at her with extreme sadness and pain through my teary eyes as I drove off into the night. Will it be good for me? What the hell? This is unbelievable. God, what do I do now? Molly sat stunned, depressed, and now worried. God, how did I screw that up so badly? Why doesn't he understand how much I need this, and that it won't do anything negative to our love and relationship? But deep down, she knew that it already had. They had never had a fight like this. Billy had never walked out on her, had never questioned her love for him, and now she questioned his love for her. She didn't want to admit that she had already done damage, maybe major damage, to her marriage, but she had also already agreed that this Saturday Andrew would pick her up, take her to brunch, and then they would check into the Hilton and have sex all afternoon. They would then go out to dinner and dancing and come back for more sex, likely Saturday night and Sunday. She planned on having as much sex with him as she could before she came back Sunday night, and dedicated herself to her marriage and to Billy. Certainly he will get over this. I know he is hurt right now, and I really didn't explain this very well, but it was so wrong of him to accuse me of already having an affair and being so angry at what I felt I deserved and needed. Her mind was made up, and she was convinced that Billy would get over this, and they would move forward together to an even better relationship in the future. After 2 hours with no word from Billy, she started to get really concerned. He was not in a good mental state when he left. She thought for sure he would call her and they could make up and he would come home so she could show him her love for him, but with no call and no text she tried calling him. He didn't pick up, so she left him a voicemail. Billy, I am sorry that you took this so dramatically and that this hurt you. Please don't be hurt. I love only you and want to be with you forever. This isn't about you and me. This is just me getting something that I never got in my past and working this out of my system. Please understand and come back to me. She got ready for bed, checked her phone again and saw no response from Billy. She lay down on their bed and drifted into a fitful sleep. I cried as I drove over to the Hilton in the next suburb and checked in for the night. Then I ended up spending way too much time in the hotel bar, getting hammered and falling into bed later that night. I ignored the calls and voicemail from Molly, still shocked and in disbelief that she thought this was okay and that she could profess her love for me, but still insist on having sex outside of our wedding vows. I knew how incredibly stubborn she could be when she made up her mind, but this wasn't one of those times when I could acquiesce and let it go. This was a marriage-ending mistake, and I had to convince her of that before it was too late. But was it already too late? Even if I convinced her to say no this time, how long would it be before she went ahead and did it without telling me, going behind my back? That would for sure be the end of any trust, respect in our marriage. But by the same token, I knew that if I let her do this, I would never feel about her the same way again. And if I said yes, how long would it be before she met another guy that she just had to get out of her system? And would she, at some point, resent me for letting another man take her, and not standing up and demanding that she belonged to only me? There were no good options, and I started to feel that this was already the beginning of the end. I finally decided that my only hope and option was to talk her out of this, and get her to go to counseling with me to see if we could get to the bottom of what was driving this need for her to have sex with another man. Wednesday morning, Molly woke up, moved over to cuddle with Billy, and gasped as she realized he hadn't slept in their bed. She figured maybe he was in the guest bedroom or on the couch, but after looking all around the house and seeing that his car was still gone, she figured he never came home. That had her extremely upset. She went to her phone and saw there was no text or voicemail. She called him and he didn't answer. But after she hung up, she got a text back: "Molly, I'll be home at 7 p.m. tonight. Please go ahead and eat before I get there. We have to talk more about this and have a serious discussion about our future together." Molly looked at the message and first thought, "God, Billy, quit being so damn dramatic." She was pissed, but then she started to worry about the message. Billy was telling her that maybe they didn't have a future together, which was the very last thing she ever wanted. She loved him and wanted to be with him. Why couldn't he understand that? She would have to make him understand tonight. Molly went to work, and as soon as she sat at her desk, Andrew approached her and said, "Good morning, sexy. You look good enough to kiss and cuddle, and I hope to be doing just that this Saturday. Are we still on? Did you tell your husband? Should I be worried?" "Andrew, let me worry about Billy. He wouldn't hurt a fly. He isn't sold on the idea, but he'll be okay. And yes, we are still on for Saturday, and I get very excited thinking about it." When he left, her desk looked and said, "That being said," Molly texted Billy again. "Billy, are you okay? Please know that I only love you. I only want you, and my future with you is going to be better and better." After an hour, she received a sarcastic, short two-word response. "Yes, sure." She was getting mad at how immature Billy was being about this whole thing, but she was also sad at how much this was hurting him. She had convinced herself that she would more than make this up to him, and he would be so happy with the lovemaking and attention she would give him that in no time at all, things would be at least as good as they had been, if not better. On Wednesday, I called in sick from work, and after I knew Molly had left, I went back to her house, got my tools, and finished up some of the details on the RV. I got the solar panel mounted and functioning, finished all the electrical and Wi-Fi connections, got a new cassette for the toilet, filled up the tanks with water, and basically knew that I could finish the cabinetry on Thursday and it would be road ready. The work kept my mind off the constant pain and sorrow I was living with. With 2 hours left until Molly returned, I did some research on the internet about divorce, finances, and counselors, and felt that I had a preliminary set of plans for either contingency that I needed to take. I then went around the house, made a list of everything that was mine that I cared about, and then had just enough time to head to the bank. At the bank, I canceled our joint credit card and opened one in my name only. I canceled our joint checking account and opened one in my name only. I prepaid the mortgage on the house for the next 2 months out of our joint account, and then split the balance with a check cut to her for 50% and my 50% going into my savings account. I then went to a pub that I liked and had a craft beer and a burger and got ready for our discussion at home. Molly came home about 6 p.m. and saw that Billy was still not home. She couldn't tell if he had been home or not. She made herself a sandwich and tried to decide how to have a more positive discussion with Billy this time around. When Billy came in, she ran up to him, gave him a huge kiss on the lips, and hugged him for a long time, admonishing him for leaving. "Billy, damn it, don't ever leave like that and not let me know you were okay. I know you were hurting, but I was so worried about you and needed to know you were okay. Billy, I love you. Only you. I'll always love only you. You don't have to be hurting, Billy. You and I are solid and together and always will be. So you knew that I was hurting really and you love only me? I wish that were true, Molly, but I am no longer very sure of that. A week ago I would never have believed you could ask me for what you are now wanting me to approve of, having an affair outside of our marriage and asking me to accept it and then continue as we were before. It is inconceivable to me that you can tell me you love me, and that we will always be together, and then ask for permission to commit adultery. Billy, don't you dare say that I don't love you. It isn't cheating if you approve, and it's only sex and only one time. Quit being so damn dramatic and immature. Molly, you want to hear about drama and being immature? I'm looking at the woman I loved as if she has been possessed by someone or something I don't know. I'm looking at her trying to convince me that she loves me, and that I should accept her having sex with another man for a weekend, and just go back to being the same couple and partners we were before. But I know that will never happen. We will never be like we were before. How the hell would you feel, Molly, if I went out and got laid by someone else and told you it was just sex? That isn't fair and you know it. Billy, you've had dozens of women and all kinds of sexual experiences in your past, and I didn't get to have any of that. And to answer you, no, if you went out and had sex with someone, then I would kick you out and I wouldn't know if I could forgive you. And why should that be so different for me? Why shouldn't I kick you out, and why do you think I can forgive you? Molly, I can't believe you're proposing this. By the way, have you agreed to this already? Did you talk to your lover today and assure him that you'd be screwing him before he knew it? Damn you, Billy, why do you have to twist this? He isn't my love. At most, he will have a one-time sex experience. And yes, I did talk to him. This Saturday he is picking me up in the morning and I'll be back Sunday evening. On Monday, I will rock your world and be the sexiest, most loving wife you could possibly hope for. You already were that, but you won't be that ever again if you go through with this. Molly gasped at that, recoiled back to the kitchen and sat in a chair. She looked at Billy with pleading in her voice and eyes. Billy, please know that I love you so much. Please, please don't let this hurt our marriage, our partnership. You are my husband now and always, my lover, my best friend, the one I want to father our children. You are my everything. God, Molly, you are just not at all on the same planet I am. If all that were true, you would never consider what you are telling me you are going to do this Saturday. This conversation is getting us nowhere. I'm telling you, if you go through with this, we're done. I'll be back on Friday night. Let's spend the night together, making love and enjoying each other while we can. Billy, don't walk out on me again. We need to get through this. Please. Friday night, Molly. I'll bring dinner around 7 p.m. What time is Andrew picking you up Saturday morning? I'll tell him at 11 a.m., but you don't have to leave. I would like you to meet him. Jesus, Molly, meet him. If I see him, I will literally kick the living hell out of him. Why would I possibly want to meet the a-hole who is trying to destroy our marriage? Think hard about this before we meet on Friday. Billy, no, wait. Please don't leave like this. Tell me you're okay, that this isn't going to hurt us. Molly, I will never be okay with you having sex with anyone other than your husband. If you want to have sex with anyone else, get a divorce and screw every man on the planet. Hell, screw the Martians. I would not stop you. Your so-called little request today has already hurt us more than you seem to comprehend. I'll make this one promise to you. If you cancel this cheating affair and tell him you don't want to see him now or ever again, and if you promise to go to counseling with me to work on our relationship, then maybe we will be okay. If not, then I know we're finished. Tell me your answer on Friday night and think hard about what you are doing to us. Billy, don't give me ultimatums and don't walk out on me. Please, we will be alright, maybe even better after this. Yeah, right, pigs are flying, I said, my words dripping with sarcasm. I turned and walked out the door, turned off the voice recorder, and headed back to the Hilton. I booked a room for Wednesday and Thursday night. Then I called my boss and told him I had a family emergency and needed to take the rest of the week off, which he agreed to, though only reluctantly when I wouldn't tell him the nature of my emergency. Molly slumped over and put her head on the table after Billy left. How could he be so damn stubborn about this? She was sure he would never leave her, but had they already done severe damage to their relationship? If that was the case, would going ahead with her plans make it any worse? She was committed to the idea of being with Andrew. Her longing and lust for a sexual tryst with him were so obsessive, she couldn't seem to let it go.
Now start second story.
What were you looking for, dear? Andrea said calmly. At this point I couldn't form words and mumbled something unintelligible. Your key, I need to move your car. Why do you have a box of condoms in your purse? Because. Again it was said nonchalantly, as if my question was somehow ridiculous. Because why? I began to regain my ability to think and speak. There was a long pregnant pause before she answered. She creased her face slightly, took a deep breath and then said, "Snag, well, you don't want me to do it without them, do you?" It was as if a truck had come down on me. Staggering, I stepped back and sat down in one of the chairs at the kitchen table. I had no idea what to say and didn't know what to think. All the air had been sucked out of my lungs and I couldn't breathe. Andrea continued, "I use protective gear with him all the time. I'm sure he's very clean, but I'm also sure you don't want me bringing home any unwanted germs." And Andrea said it like it was the most natural thing in the world. Like I was the one being ridiculous, asking why my wife was putting a box of condoms in her purse. Silly me. Now, before I continue, I suppose it would be helpful to tell you a little bit about me, Andrea, and the Stewart family. My name is John L. Stewart. I am 33 years of age. I am married to Andrea P. Stewart, née Layton, and she is the same age as me. We met at the university, and were married immediately after graduation. I am a mechanical engineer, and Andrea is a real estate agent. We have 3 beautiful daughters, I've told you about them before, and we live in a very upscale neighborhood in Albany, New York. It's a 2-story colonial home with a 3-car garage, circular driveway and a pool in the backyard. The house has 5 bedrooms and 6 bathrooms. It's actually much bigger than we needed, but Andrea found it and it was a good deal at the time, so we bought it. We've lived here for about 3 years now, and have had time to get to know the neighborhood and the people who live around us. The schools in the neighborhood are very good, and it's easy for both of us to get to work. All in all, I can say that life has been almost perfect. Almost. If it was perfect, I wouldn't have to work 60 hours a week, and Andrea wouldn't have to work all hours of the day and night and on weekends too. We manage to take care of the kids first and foremost, and have dinner together at least 3 times a week. On Sundays we always get together to do something together, and then sit down at the dinner table, eat, talk, laugh, and find out what everyone has done the past week and what's coming up for the next week. For me, the dinner table is one of the hearts of the home. My mother and father taught me that. We would gather around it to eat, discuss business, tell stories and laugh, sort out problems and make plans for the future. That's why when Andrea and I had our conversation, it took place in the kitchen. We ended up sitting around the table. This has nothing to do with you, John. It has everything to do with me. It's just something I need, and it's separate from you and me and our family. You'd think the woman saying those words was a complete stranger to the woman I'd been married to for 11 years. The woman with whom I shared a family, a home, a bed. She continued. Don't dwell on it, John. In fact, you can forget about it because it won't affect you in any way. Our lives won't change. Our family hasn't changed. It hasn't affected you in any way. And believe me, honey, it won't affect you in the future either. I took a big breath because I realized I wasn't breathing. Really? Are you serious? I'm supposed to just forget about it? My wife is having fun with some other man and I'm supposed to just forget about it? Oh my God. I exhaled. Breathing is such a tricky thing to remember to do. And you just told me you've been having fun with Rob for 2 years. What the hell, Andrea? She looked at me with an expression that said I was talking nonsense. Honey, you've been very busy with your work and so have I, and the kids are at the stage where their lives demand a lot of our time, so this is just a little thing to take the edge off. She paused to let that bit of wisdom soak in. If you think about it rationally, our sex life is greatly diminished from what it was, but at this stage of life there's nothing we can do about it. She paused again. So what I do doesn't matter to us. It's selfish of me. Yes, I admit that. But I get to scratch the itch and come home to you and our daughters and be a good wife and mother. My mouth dropped open as I listened to this. Nonsense. Wait, you're equating infidelity with being a better wife and mother. I turned my head slightly so I could hear her better. I couldn't believe what I was hearing from the woman I'd been married to for 11 years. Suddenly the room came into motion, and it was as if I was on a ride that was out of control. I fell from my chair to the floor, managing to catch myself with one hand, and then the contents of my stomach unceremoniously came into view. I threw up on the kitchen floor. A moment later, I staggered to my feet and made my way as quickly as I could to the bedroom bathroom to finish the job. I was on my knees trying to regain my composure when Andrea poked her head out from around the corner and pressed her face against the porcelain bowl entrance. "I'm sorry, sweetheart. I didn't plan for you to find out this way. I figured it would be better for you not to know. What good will come of it?" She watched me gasp again, then took a face cloth, wiped it under cold water and handed it to me. I took it and wiped my face and mouth. Slowly, on very wobbly legs, I stood up. I could see the look on her face. She really looked worried. That was the most puzzling thing. That was what I couldn't understand. Who was this woman? What had she done to my wife? Where was the real Andrea? "Honey, I'll take the girls to school and see you after work. I'll make dinner, and then when the girls go to bed we can have a drink and talk, okay?" Sweat was rolling off my face, and there was no way I could find the words that could in any way express what I wanted to say. I mean, Jesus Christ, I could hear the doors closing and her car starting, so I slowly got up off the bathroom floor, plopped down on the bed and closed my eyes. I had to concentrate on not trying to throw up anymore. There was nothing left in my intestines to vomit out, except maybe what was left of my shattered heart. The rest of the day passed like a blur. I remember calling my boss and telling him I was sick and couldn't make it to the office. I had a few things to reschedule, but nothing that couldn't wait a day or so. The house was quiet, and I realized that Andrea and the girls had left. I looked at the clock and realized it was 10 o'clock. I undressed and stood under the hot shower for ages. Maybe half an hour, but my ability to tell time was somehow impaired. I dressed in jeans and a shirt and returned to the kitchen. My earlier endeavors had already been cleaned up. The window was open and the smell was almost gone. I sat down at the table and stared at him, hoping he would give me some great revelation about what the hell had happened this morning. I started formulating questions, so many things I needed to know, but what I really wanted to do was rewind time, make the day better by not discovering a box of condoms in my wife's purse. Maybe she was right. Maybe it was better that I didn't know. But now I do know. And she was the one who told me. I felt dizzy again and had to lie down later that day. After trying to lie down and regain some semblance of ability to think, I got up and went back to the kitchen, to the scene of the crime, so to speak. I poured a large glass of ice water, grabbed a notepad and pen. I took 3 extra-strength Tylenol pills and chugged the water, starting to take notes. I'm an engineer and we take notes on everything, at least the important stuff. I was having a hard time concentrating on the damn paper. I started taking notes, but it was incomprehensible gibberish. I tore out the page, rolled it up and threw it in the corner. I started many paragraphs but always came back to the main one. What the hell happened to my marriage? I got up, put the notebook aside and decided that I needed to go outside, get some fresh air, and maybe that would help me clear my head and figure out what to do. I walked for almost 2 hours to the point where I felt faint. I realized that what little I had tried to eat at breakfast had disappeared too suddenly, and I had only had a glass of water since then. I stopped at a diner and managed to stuff myself with a bacon, tomato, and lettuce sandwich, washing it down with Diet Coke. The food made me feel a little better, and on the way home I figured out what I wanted to talk to Andrea about. I wanted to know why she had replaced me with her lover and what her plans were for the future. If she was leaving me, I was pretty sure it was going to happen without my daughters. I was determined that they would not be victims here, and that I would fight for them with everything I had. Just because their mother couldn't hold back around men is no reason for my children or me to suffer unnecessarily. I love my wife. At least I used to. I'm not so sure of that now. Where did things go wrong? I've been thinking about the fact that apparently I'm not a good enough husband for her. If that was the case, why was she looking for love with other men? Did she really intend to leave me? Did she intend to take my children? Was the box of condoms in her purse a slip on her part to keep her secret, or was it an opportunity to put everything out in the open and then make her moves? God, this is driving me crazy. Andrea, I made sure to get home early. I wanted to make a nice dinner and spend time after dinner with the girls and John, family time, all together. When the girls and I arrived, John wasn't home, but his car was parked there. I thought maybe he had gone for a run to think about what we had talked about this morning. I tried to take it a little lightly and make a joke about it, but John wasn't laughing and his reaction, come to think of it, was pretty normal. I mean, how do you react when your wife says she's having fun with some other man? I probably could have handled it better, but the fact that John had found condoms threw me off balance, and thus out of my feeble attempt at guffawing. I needed to take charge of the situation before things got out of hand, and we ran into problems. When John came home, he was very quiet. He watched me like a hawk circling to pounce on prey. He hardly said anything to me except a muffled grunt and the occasional aha or no. I was wearing some of my tightest jeans and a sleeveless blouse, and I had my hair pinned up the way John liked it. I even spritzed on some perfume that I knew he really liked. I wanted to be attractive to him, and let him know that what we needed to talk about was in no way threatening to him. After dinner, the girls did their homework, I cleaned up the kitchen, and then we went outside to get some fresh air and throw baskets in the driveway. John is always up for it, but today he sat inside and didn't say a word as we walked outside. I was really starting to question the decision to indulge my fantasies outside of marriage. It was only once a week and during the day, and I always came home clean. I never let my Thursday indulgences interfere with John and the girls in any way. There were many occasions when I canceled my Thursday. Work, family, and personal reasons sometimes affected what I did, but each time I was sure that my family came first. Thursday was about indulging that itch that needed scratching. It was something that just happened. Rob and I met after I transitioned into real estate agency work. He is married and has a family about the same age as my kids. I found that John and I never had time to be alone together. We almost had to schedule it. That made it really exciting. Now I'm being sarcastic, but I know you think I'm a slut for cheating on my husband. Maybe you're right. Maybe you're wrong. John is a great husband and father. He works very hard to provide for his family, and I know he does it with the understanding that if we had to live on his income alone, we could do it. So he treats my income as a bonus and we keep it in the bank. Most of it went to paying off the mortgage early. Some of it went to home improvements, but our savings and investment accounts are fine too. The problem is that with busy careers and 3 busy kids, we don't have time for ourselves. No time to pamper ourselves and connect as a couple, as lovers. We used to be at each other's place almost every night. Now we're lucky. It happens once a week. I need more, and I know John wants more too. It's great. Why do you think we have 3 kids and we're just past 30 years old? My Thursday indulgence was something I wanted to do to fulfill my needs. I didn't want to make John feel bad by pestering him. Who needs that? I decided a while ago that I needed to do something that would give me what I wanted, but also make sure it didn't affect my family in any way. They do come first, but I figured there was a way to get what I needed and not jeopardize my future. So far, I have been right. But now the challenge was to protect my family and allow me to continue doing what I was doing. That was the challenge. How to make sure my husband didn't feel threatened and that I could continue to have my Thursdays. He walks and you say sit down. It's just a conversation. Let him know that you know what's best. Andrea. The kids had already gone to bed and now was the perfect time to talk. I pulled some wine out of the fridge, poured some for myself, and brought John his favorite beer. It was an IPA from a local craft brewery. My heart was beating pretty fast, and I had to admit to myself that I didn't have much confidence that this conversation was going to go the way I wanted it to. There was a lot at stake. Honey, sit down. We need to talk. John looked at me sullenly and slowly sat down. I slid a glass of beer over to him. I began. I have to tell you that you have nothing to worry about. I'm not doing anything to affect you or the kids. No matter what you think, you and them come first in my life. John looked at me like I had 2 heads. I continued. Really, darling? That's not what you have to worry about. I'm your wife. I love you very much. Then John objected. Yes, I suppose you do, but do you love me? He was good. Yes, darling. I love you very much. I've loved you ever since I met you, and my love for you has grown stronger every day, and then increased again with each child we have. I am so happy with our life. Our children are perfect and you are perfect. His mouth was slightly ajar, and when he tried to speak, the words wouldn't come out. He took a small sip to lubricate his throat. So why the hell are you having fun with some other man? I looked at my husband. Well, it's hard to explain, but I guess I have to try. I owe you one. I took a small sip and began. It started with fantasies. Everyone has them. I know you do too. We even talked about some of them. And then it grew. As we got busier and busier. Your work, my work, the girls' life. We spent less and less time with each other. I wanted you so badly it hurt, but I knew it wasn't going to happen. I had an itch that needed scratching, and you weren't always here to scratch it for me. You were busy working, taking the girls to their events. I was busy working. I have a crazy schedule. How many evenings and weekends have I worked and you worked, and it kept us from being together? There was a pause. I needed a little drink. So I've come to the conclusion that I need it. I know it might sound ridiculous, but it's what I needed. It calms me down, makes me feel good. Rob can help scratch the itch I need. We only see each other once a week and limit ourselves to an hour or so. It's just enough to get me through the day and week. I can't get enough of you, so I'm replacing it with you. John stared blankly at the table in front of him. I could see he didn't know what to say or do. I continued. Honey, I want nothing more than for you to take me to the bedroom and shake the juices out of me. That's what will make me feel like your wife, your woman. I emphasized your. In a quieter voice I said, but I need this for me. Right now and for a while longer, until our lives change and we have more time for each other. So please be patient with me and know that I am yours. Completely. And I always will be. I got up from the table, took John's hand and led him to the bedroom. He walked without saying a word. You think I was a cheating bitch, yet I professed my love for my husband. Well, I guess I have cheated, but I do love my husband. But I need him to give me that a little more time. I need him to give me space to get what I need so I can be an even better wife to him and mother to our children. My happiness has been the key to making me a better wife and mother. On Thursday afternoon, I intended to keep doing this for a while longer. After all, I know what's best. I know this is what I need to do for now. John will understand. He'll let me do this. He loves me enough to understand and let me do it. John. A visit with my lawyer, Roy, a week or so later. Shit. The conversation didn't go well. It started when I discovered an unopened box of condoms in my wife's purse. I was looking for a spare car key. She often carries both car keys in her purse to move the car. Her purse was stuffed with all sorts of junk that takes up women's purses. Finding a box of condoms in there was, well, a million things running through my head at once. While I was looking at the box, Andrea appeared in the kitchen and simply took the box from my hands and put it back in her purse. Roy. I need your help. I continued to explain my situation in excruciatingly detailed detail. Roy nodded, made oh-huck sounds at frequent intervals and made notes in his yellow notepad. And when I was done, offered, well, John, what can I say? This is a rather unusual story. I work as a divorce attorney and I hear a lot of tragic stories, but this is certainly a new twist. Is $300 an hour what he's good at? I got right to the point. Jesus, Roy, what the hell can I do with this? He replied, what do you want to do with it? And there it was. What the hell am I going to do about my wife and her boyfriend? Then he got serious for a moment, then continued. First off, as your lawyer, I can tell you that my first piece of advice is don't do anything stupid. Don't get into a fight with anyone and don't threaten them with physical violence. In New York State, the courts look down on that. And you'll end up in a jail cell. And we don't want that, do we? No, we certainly don't want that. A jail cell didn't solve any of my problems. I mean, I have to do something about it. I can't just let it go on. So, Roy, what are my options? Well, there are many things you can do, but I have to be honest with you, they all suck. I was stunned at such a frank admission coming from the mouth of a seasoned 50-year-old divorce attorney in a suit and vest. What are you talking about? Roy acquired an even more serious expression on his face, if such a thing is possible for a man like him who lives and breathes nasty divorce cases. Supposedly he was the best in the neighborhood and he wasn't cheap. But Roy wasn't being realistic. Given that I was only 34, had 3 daughters and a career that was growing and had excellent prospects, now was not the time to blow it. So, Roy outlined the options available to me. His crash course in divorce was deeply depressing. In New York State, there are essentially 7 different grounds for divorce. He went on to list them. 1. Cruel and inhuman treatment. 2. Abandonment of the plaintiff by the defendant for 1 or more years. 3. The defendant's incarceration for 3 or more consecutive years after the marriage. 4. Defendants committing voluntary adultery with a person other than the plaintiff after the marriage. 5. Separation pursuant to a decree or judgment of separation for 1 or more years after the entry of such decree or judgment. 6. Separation pursuant to a written separation agreement signed by the parties for 1 or more years after the agreement is signed. And 7. The relationship between husband and wife has irretrievably deteriorated for a period of at least 6 months, provided that one of the parties so states under oath. So, what the hell was I supposed to do? 4. The adultery provision on the face of it was the number one solution to my little problem. Let's put a pencil mark next to that clause for now and look at the others. Living separate and apart for a year is probably the way to go. Let's put a pencil mark next to numbers 5 and 6 for now. 7. Number 7 was one of the most common reasons for divorces in this state. Roy said he made a lot of money on it. Unless I do something stupid like beat the crap out of Roy. Or run away from my wife and family to a Caribbean island. There doesn't seem to be an easy solution to the cheating wife problem. Number 7 is the no-fault position, which is the way out for one or the other person when they don't want to stay in the marriage. But at first glance it seems that number 4 on the list of reasons for divorce above is my top candidate, at least for now. But not so fast, Roy thinks. My boy, the real devil in all this is that you have 3 kids. I assume you want to be a full-time father, not a part-time one? I looked at Roy with a puzzled expression on my face that said, "What are you really saying?" "Well, of course I want to be a full-time father. That's my main reason for coming to you." Roy nodded sagely again and answered me with a nope. "What I'm saying, John, is that right now, after the divorce, all you're going to accomplish is to turn into a part-time father, living alone most of the time and without the financial resources you have now. Unless, of course, you start earning a lot more than you are now." I sat there, stunned as if I'd been punched in the head by Mike Tyson. One of those punches that makes you lose consciousness and spin in place, about to fall over. You can't tell which way is up or left or right. Good thing I was already sitting up. After drinking water and regaining the ability to form more than 2 syllables, I managed to look at my memorized lawyer and asked, "Jesus, Roy, what the hell are you telling me?" My eyes bulged and I could feel the veins in my neck swelling. My blood pressure was approaching stroke level. In his calm and very controlled voice, looking at me over his glasses, he summed it up. "Well, John, I don't want to be too harsh, but I would be less than honest with you if I told you anything other than the godlike honest truth." He paused and swallowed before continuing. "You're screwed, my boy." My mouth was open, and my jaw muscles were suddenly unable to function enough to close my mouth. As those words sunk into the depths of my soul, I realized how death row inmates must feel as they approach the final hour, waiting only to meet their executioner. This grim realization swept over me. To think that my cheating wife was going to get the better of me. Well, the room seemed to revolve around some unknown axis, and for the next few minutes, everything was a blur. Time froze, sped up and froze in place. I had no idea what it was doing. The next thing I knew, Roy was standing on one side of me and his secretary Shirley on the other. She was holding a bottle of water, offering it to me. Water for a drowning man. Perhaps I was in a desert. It might as well have been Mars. Maybe I'll see one of those expensive Mars rovers and regain my sanity. Or maybe I'll just drown. Or maybe, who knows? I breathed into the brown paper bag, trying to regain my ability to breathe normally. I think I was suffocating from hyperventilation. I took the water bottle, drank almost all of it in one big gulp, and returned the empty bottle to Shirley. When I regained my ability to breathe normally, as well as my ability to think logically, I looked at Roy and revisited the 7 reasons for divorce in New York. So why don't I seriously consider number 4 on your nice list, Roy? I mean, my wife has been getting it from another man for some time now. She even admitted it to me in our kitchen, for goodness sake. Why shouldn't I force this shit show because of her infidelity? It's really all on her conscience, not mine. Roy nodded at me, and his face said several things at once without needing to say any words. But then he did speak. I wouldn't want Roy to have to represent me in criminal court. I mean, how convincing a defense can be if your lawyer shrugs and grimaces at the jury and expects them to know what that means. No. Roy was good at the divorce game, so I'll stick with that, using him as my spokesman. John, I don't mean to be too rude, but really all you'll accomplish is handing Andrea your house, most of the furnishings, and most importantly, your children, and control of the agenda. In very short, you will get screwed in the divorce, and then she will get money from you to go screw more other men. And the saddest part is that eventually your kids will wake up in the morning, and one of your ex-wife's boyfriends will be sitting at the breakfast table. He will chat with them as if he is their father, and gradually they will start to forget that you are their father, and you'll be paying for all of this. Oh my God, I couldn't realize what a nightmare he had just described. It was the worst outcome imaginable. I would have preferred to just shoot myself in the head so my children would forget me. But if I did that, they would forget me even faster. Hell no. In that very moment, I firmly decided that this staggeringly awful shit show Roy had just described was not going to be my fate, nor the fate of my 3 daughters. No way in hell. So Roy, please tell me there is another scenario where I won't suffer the loss of my daughters other than a weekend a month and 2 weeks in the summer. I mean, really, what can I realistically do to remain the father I am now and want to remain? It really sucks. You know what I'm trying to say. So clumsy? Roy sighed heavily. John, I understand exactly what you want, and I'd be a bad legal advisor if I didn't advise you, my boy, on the best plan to stay the master in this unfortunate situation. So listen carefully. And then he went on, describing in great detail what he thought was a realistic plan of action for me to deal with Andrea, keep my children safe, and do all of this without leaving the house. He also detailed the 7 reasons he had listed earlier for divorce, and how none of them would get me what I wanted. He had a different plan that he said would accomplish almost everything I wanted, given my priorities. Roy's plan was very simple. Do nothing. That's right. Do nothing. Continue to be married to Andrea and continue to be the best father I could be. Continue to enjoy my family and the closeness I shared with my wife. To ignore as much as possible what she was saying in the kitchen and move on with my life. Andrea said her extramarital sex had nothing to do with us, so why not believe that and continue to enjoy my relationship with my wife? You think Roy is an incredibly incompetent lawyer and I'm a damn fool for believing him, don't you? Well, that's how I reacted too. How could I look at myself in the mirror in the morning without being disgusted that I was putting up with her cheating? What the hell had my marriage and my life become? Roy let his sage advice take a moment to comprehend, then cleared his throat, sipped some water and continued. I know you must believe that I'm not a very good divorce lawyer, but from my vast experience I can tell you that in your situation you will lose, and you will lose far more than you will gain. You may be able to fix your wife's infidelity, but you will lose your children, your home, your financial future, and most importantly, your happiness. The old bastard waited a moment longer before continuing his lecture on loss. I know this seems very unfair to you, and frankly it is extremely unfair, but divorce happens legally. The court tends to give custody to the mother. I know what you're thinking. Infidelity should be a factor for the court to consider, but it usually isn't. Roy looked saddened by this fact. It was as if he was personally offended by the state of affairs in New York State divorce law. I'm sure many of his clients would like infidelity to be taken into account in matters such as child custody and home, but it isn't. I decided to sigh again. So, Roy, let me rack my feeble brain. Andrea is divorcing other men for her own pleasure, and there's nothing I can do about it. And if I divorce her, she'll be laughing all the way home when she takes the kids away from me, our house, and will probably have to pay to maintain her lifestyle. I wasn't sure if I was questioning what I had just heard, or if I was summarizing it in some way that nicely brought it all together for easy understanding. In my small lizard-like brain I knew I was screwed. I had wasted 11 years of my life on a woman who must be laughing at me every day, at least every time she had fun with her boyfriend Rob.